Trust patterns, not apologies. Trusting patterns over apologies is a defense that protects you from emotional reset traps. Apologies are powerful because they trigger hope. They signal relief, resolution, and the promise of change. Manipulators exploit this by using apologies as emotional erasers, not as indicators of accountability. When words say sorry, but behavior repeats, the apology becomes a tool, not a truth. The human brain is wired to respond to remorse. Hearing an apology lowers defenses and reactivates empathy, especially if the apology is emotional or self-critical. This emotional response often overrides memory. Pain fades, optimism rises, and the cycle quietly resets. Patterns are what remain when emotion wears off. They show what someone does when nothing is being said. A pattern is repeated behavior across time, context, and consequence. It reveals priorities more accurately than any promise ever could. When you focus on patterns, you stop being swayed by moments and start seeing trajectories. You notice how often apologies follow the same actions, how timing coincides with consequences, and how change never quite arrives. This defense can be emotionally difficult because it requires letting go of potential. It forces you to confront reality rather than intention. Manipulators rely on your willingness to believe in who they could be rather than who they consistently show themselves to be. When you choose patterns, you remove that leverage. Trusting patterns doesn't make you unforgiving. It makes you grounded. You can acknowledge an apology without allowing it to override evidence. Over time, this shifts power back to you. Words lose their hypnotic effect. Behavior becomes the metric, and manipulation collapses under the weight of its own repetition. Refuse urgency. Refusing urgency is a defense that cuts directly through one of the most common manipulation tactics: manufactured time pressure. Urgency is rarely about necessity. More often, it is a psychological weapon designed to override judgment by making delay feel dangerous. When someone insists that something must happen now, they are often trying to prevent you from thinking, checking, or consulting your own instincts. Urgency hijacks the nervous system. It creates the illusion that waiting equals loss, failure, rejection, or harm. Your body reacts before your mind can evaluate. Heart rate rises, thoughts narrow, and the desire for relief pushes you toward quick agreement. Refusing urgency breaks this spell by rejecting the false premise that speed is required. When you slow down, cracks appear. Deadlines suddenly become flexible. Consequences soften. The tone shifts. Manipulators rely on momentum, and when you stop moving, they are forced to reveal whether the urgency was real or fabricated. Genuine situations survive scrutiny and time. False ones collapse under it. Emotionally, refusing urgency can feel uncomfortable because it means sitting with uncertainty and resisting pressure to perform. That discomfort is often mistaken for danger, but it is actually clarity arriving. The anxiety you feel is not a signal to act. It is a signal that someone is trying to rush you past your better judgment. This defense also restores power. When you refuse urgency, you decide the pace. You signal that your decisions are not made under stress, fear, or external timelines. Over time, urgency loses its grip on you. What once felt overwhelming becomes transparent, and pressure becomes just noise you no longer mistake for truth. Identify gaslighting phrases. Identifying gaslighting phrases is a critical defense because gaslighting does not attack your logic first. It attacks your perception. Its purpose is to make you doubt what you saw, felt, remembered, or understood, slowly eroding your trust in your own mind. Once that trust weakens, control becomes effortless. Gaslighting phrases are often subtle and emotionally loaded. They sound reasonable, calm, even caring, which is why they are so dangerous. Statements like, "You're overreacting," "That never happened," or "You're too sensitive" are not explanations. They are erasures. They replace your lived experience with a version that benefits the speaker. The more you engage with these phrases emotionally, the more power they gain. Emotionally, gaslighting creates confusion before it creates pain. You begin to feel unstable, unsure, and dependent on external validation to confirm reality. That uncertainty keeps you off balance. Manipulators exploit this by positioning themselves as the authority on what is real, while subtly framing you as unreliable. The moment you recognize a gaslighting phrase, the spell weakens. You stop asking whether you are wrong and start noticing the pattern. Why is your memory always the problem? Why are your feelings dismissed rather than addressed? Why does accountability disappear the moment you raise a concern? Awareness turns confusion into clarity. This defense restores internal alignment. You no longer debate your reality with someone committed to rewriting it. You understand that repetition does not equal truth, and confidence does not equal accuracy. Over time, identifying gaslighting phrases rebuilds self-trust. You learn to anchor yourself in your own perception, making it far harder for anyone to destabilize you by questioning your sanity, emotions, or experience. Set internal boundaries. Setting internal boundaries is one of the most powerful defenses against manipulation because it happens entirely within you, beyond anyone else's reach. External boundaries can be argued with, pushed against, or ignored. Internal boundaries cannot. They define what you will emotionally engage with, what you will tolerate, and what you will never negotiate, regardless of pressure. Manipulation often succeeds not because people lack strength, but because their internal limits are unclear. When you don't know where you end, others decide for you. Guilt slips in. Obligation takes root. You start managing emotions that aren't yours to carry. Internal boundaries stop this transfer before it begins. These boundaries are not rules you announce. They are silent agreements you make with yourself. I will not absorb blame that isn't mine. I will not argue my reality. I will not sacrifice my peace to keep someone comfortable. Once set, they act like an emotional filter. Words may still reach you, but they no longer penetrate. Emotionally, this defense is confronting because it forces you to face conditioning. Many people were taught that love requires self-abandonment, that harmony matters more than self-respect. Manipulators exploit this programming relentlessly. Internal boundaries rewrite it. They remind your nervous system that discomfort is survivable and self-betrayal is not. When internal boundaries are strong, manipulation feels different. Pressure becomes obvious. Guilt feels artificial. You sense when something crosses a line instantly, without needing justification. You stop explaining yourself because your clarity no longer depends on approval. Over time, these boundaries change your presence. You become harder to provoke, harder to rush, harder to control. Not because you fight more, but because there is less access to you. And where access ends, manipulation loses its power. Don't explain excessively. Not explaining excessively is a powerful defense because over-explanation is often mistaken for honesty, when in reality, it creates openings for manipulation. When you explain too much, you reveal uncertainty, invite negotiation, and hand over emotional leverage. Manipulators don't need to overpower you. They wait for you to talk yourself into a weaker position. Excessive explanation is usually driven by fear of being misunderstood, fear of being disliked, fear of conflict or rejection. That fear pushes you to justify boundaries, soften decisions, and overshare reasoning in hopes of being accepted. Manipulators recognize this instantly. Every extra sentence becomes material they can question, twist, or use to apply pressure. When you explain briefly and stop, something important happens. The dynamic shifts. The other person is forced to accept your decision without dissecting it. Silence removes their ability to latch onto details and turn the conversation into a debate. What felt like clarity through explanation often becomes vulnerability through exposure. Emotionally, restraint feels uncomfortable at first. You may feel rude, cold, or selfish for not elaborating. That discomfort is conditioning, not reality. Healthy interactions do not require you to defend your boundaries or persuade others to respect them. The urge to keep talking is often the last pull of control trying to reassert itself. By saying less, you preserve power. Your words carry weight because they are not diluted. Your decisions stand on their own, rather than being propped up by justification. Over time, this defense trains others to engage with you on equal footing because there is nothing extra to exploit and no explanation left to dismantle. Accept discomfort without reacting. Accepting discomfort without reacting is a psychological defense that dismantles manipulation at its most effective point, your urge to escape emotional pain. Manipulation works because discomfort feels intolerable. Awkward silence, guilt, tension, disappointment, or fear create an internal pressure that demands immediate relief. Reacting provides that relief, even when it costs you control. When discomfort arises, the nervous system looks for the fastest exit. That exit often looks like explaining yourself, giving in, arguing, apologizing, or changing your stance. Manipulators intentionally apply pressure to trigger this reflex. They rely on your need to feel better now rather than protected later. Accepting discomfort interrupts that cycle. Discomfort is not danger, but the body often treats it as such. Your heart rate shifts, your thoughts speed up, and urgency appears out of nowhere. If you can stay still inside that sensation, something powerful happens. The intensity peaks and then fades. The moment passes without you surrendering anything. That experience retrains your brain, teaching it that you don't need to react to survive. This defense also exposes intent. When you don't react, the other person often escalates, changes tactics, or reveals frustration. In that space, you gain clarity. You see whether the pressure was about mutual understanding or control. Accepting discomfort is not passive. It is controlled restraint. It communicates strength without confrontation and stability without explanation. Over time, your tolerance for emotional pressure grows, while manipulation loses its primary weapon. When discomfort no longer controls your actions, neither do the people who rely on it to move you. Question guilt that appears suddenly. Questioning guilt that appears suddenly is a critical defense against emotional manipulation because authentic guilt develops from reflection, not from pressure. Manipulative guilt is abrupt, intense, and strategically timed. It shows up the moment you hesitate, say no, or assert a boundary. That timing is not accidental. It is designed to override your judgment before you can evaluate what's actually happening. This kind of guilt feels sharp and urgent. It tells you that you are selfish, ungrateful, or cruel for protecting yourself. It creates an emotional emergency that demands immediate correction, usually in the form of compliance. Manipulators understand that guilt short-circuits logic. When you feel morally threatened, you rush to restore your self-image rather than examine whether the guilt is deserved. The key is recognizing that real responsibility feels different. Genuine guilt comes with clarity and proportion. Sudden guilt feels overwhelming and vague. It often lacks a clear cause, relying instead on implication and emotional weight. When you pause and question it, you often realize that no boundary was crossed, no harm was done, and no obligation was violated. This defense requires emotional courage because questioning guilt can feel like questioning your own goodness. Manipulators exploit that fear. They equate compliance with morality, teaching you that being a good person means putting yourself last. When you challenge sudden guilt, you separate empathy from self-erasure. Over time, this awareness rewires your emotional responses. You stop mistaking discomfort for wrongdoing. You learn that feeling bad doesn't mean you did something wrong. And as that distinction sharpens, guilt loses its power as a weapon because it can no longer be used to control your choices without your consent. Recognize flattery as leverage. Recognizing flattery as leverage is a critical defense because praise is one of the easiest ways to bypass skepticism and disarm awareness. Flattery feels good. It activates validation, lowers guard, and creates a subtle sense of obligation. When praise appears at the right moment, it doesn't feel manipulative. It feels affirming. That is exactly why it works. Manipulators rarely flatter randomly. Compliments are timed. They arrive before a request, during resistance, or after hesitation. The praise is designed to shape your identity in a way that makes refusal feel like self-betrayal. You're kind, so you'll help. You're smart, so you'll understand. You're different from others, so you won't say no. The leverage isn't the compliment itself, it's the behavior it quietly demands. Emotionally, flattery hooks into a deep human need to be seen and valued. When that need is activated, discernment weakens. You become more willing to overlook inconsistencies, ignore discomfort, or rationalize red flags to preserve the positive image being reflected back at you. The praise becomes something you unconsciously try to maintain. This defense isn't about rejecting compliments, it's about observing what follows them. Genuine appreciation stands alone. Manipulative flattery is transactional. It escalates, shifts tone, or disappears the moment compliance is uncertain. When you recognize this pattern, the emotional spell breaks. Once you see flattery as a tool rather than truth, it loses its grip. You stop confusing admiration with alignment and validation with safety. You can accept praise without surrendering judgment. And in that awareness, leverage collapses because what once felt like connection is revealed as an attempt to control the direction of your choice. Stay silent when provoked. Staying silent when provoked is one of the most destabilizing defenses against manipulation, because provocation is designed to extract a reaction, not a resolution. When someone provokes you, their goal is emotional activation. Anger, defensiveness, shame, or urgency pull you out of control and into a role they can predict and exploit. Silence denies them that entry point. Provocation works by bypassing logic and triggering identity. Insults, accusations, sarcasm, or deliberate misunderstandings are not meant to be discussed. They are meant to hook you emotionally. The moment you react, you are no longer choosing your response, you are defending yourself inside a frame they created. Silence collapses that frame. Emotionally, silence feels counterintuitive. Everything in you wants to explain, correct, or push back. That impulse is human, but it is also what manipulators count on. When you don't respond, the emotional charge has nowhere to land. The provocation hangs in the air, exposed and ineffective. Often, the person escalates or reveals insecurity, unintentionally confirming their intent. Silence also gives you back time. It allows the emotional spike to pass so clarity can return. What felt personal in the moment often looks calculated once the intensity fades. In that gap, you regain perspective and choose if a response is even necessary. Staying silent is not avoidance or weakness. It is selective engagement. You are deciding that not every attempt to access you deserves a reply. Over time, this defense conditions others to understand that emotional bait will not work because your peace is not something they can disturb on demand. Don't argue with irrational behavior. Not arguing with irrational behavior is a defense rooted in understanding that logic cannot stabilize chaos. Irrational behavior is not seeking truth, resolution, or clarity. It seeks reaction. It feeds on emotional engagement and escalates through conflict. When you argue with it, you are not correcting it, you are energizing it. Manipulators often abandon logic deliberately. They shift goalposts, contradict themselves, exaggerate, or inject emotion where facts once existed. This isn't confusion, it's strategy. Irrationality overwhelms the rational mind, pulling you into a loop where you feel compelled to explain, defend, or prove something that was never up for honest discussion. Arguing in these moments feels necessary because silence feels like loss. The discomfort of being misunderstood or falsely accused triggers a need to restore order. Manipulators exploit this instinct. The more you explain, the more material they have to twist. The more you defend, the more ground you concede. Choosing not to argue is not surrender. It is recognition. You identify that the conversation has shifted from problem solving to control. By disengaging, you remove the reward. Irrational behavior collapses without attention because it cannot self-sustain. Emotionally, this is difficult. It requires letting go of fairness, closure, and being seen as reasonable. But that sacrifice is temporary, while the cost of engagement is cumulative. Each argument drains energy and reinforces the pattern. When you stop arguing with irrational behavior, you protect your mental stability. You conserve clarity. Over time, this boundary reshapes interactions. Those who thrive on chaos lose interest, and those capable of reason are forced to meet you there. Identify double standards. Identifying double standards is a powerful defense because manipulation often hides inside imbalance. A double standard exists when rules, expectations, or judgments are applied to you but not to the other person. Manipulators rely on this imbalance to normalize control while framing it as fairness, necessity, or personality difference. When you don't notice it, you internalize responsibility that was never yours. Double standards usually reveal themselves emotionally before logically. You feel confused, defensive, or perpetually at fault. You're expected to be patient while they're allowed to explode. You must explain yourself while they owe no explanation. Your mistakes are magnified. Theirs are excused. This unevenness slowly erodes self-trust because you're trained to believe the problem is always you. The reason this tactic is effective is because humans are wired to seek fairness and harmony. When someone frames an imbalance as justified, you instinctively try to adapt rather than confront it. You overcorrect, hoping consistency will eventually be returned. Manipulators count on this hope. They benefit from flexibility while enforcing rigidity on you. Once you consciously identify a double standard, the emotional spell weakens. You begin to see patterns instead of isolated incidents. You notice how accountability only flows one way. That awareness restores clarity, and clarity restores power. You stop arguing individual moments and start questioning the structure itself. This defense can feel destabilizing because recognizing a double standard often means accepting that the relationship or situation is not what you believed it to be. But that discomfort is grounding. It reconnects you to reality. When standards are equal, respect exists. When they aren't, control does. Seeing the difference protects you from slowly surrendering yourself in the name of fairness that was never mutual. Refuse to be rushed into agreement. Refusing to be rushed into agreement is a powerful defense because speed is one of manipulation's most reliable weapons. When time feels compressed, thinking narrows. Urgency creates the illusion that hesitation equals loss, danger, or missed opportunity. Manipulators exploit this pressure to push decisions past your ability to fully evaluate them. Being rushed triggers the survival part of the brain. It prioritizes immediate resolution over accuracy or long-term consequences. In that state, agreement feels like relief. Saying yes ends the discomfort. even if it creates problems later. This is why rushed decisions are so often regretted. They are not chosen, they are escaped into. When you refuse to rush, you disrupt the emotional pacing of the interaction. You force time back into the equation. This alone can expose intent. Genuine situations can withstand delay. Manipulative ones escalate pressure, introduce fear, or frame your hesitation as incompetence or betrayal. The reaction to your refusal is often more revealing than the request itself. Emotionally, standing firm against urgency can feel uncomfortable. You may feel selfish, slow, or uncooperative. These feelings are not accidental. They are induced to override your judgment. By tolerating that discomfort without giving in, you reclaim authority over your decisions. Refusing to be rushed doesn't require confrontation. It requires stillness. You let the pressure exist without absorbing it. You allow the moment to stretch until clarity replaces impulse. Over time, this defense reshapes how others approach you. Those who rely on haste lose leverage. Those who respect autonomy remain. When agreement is no longer automatic, it becomes meaningful. And when urgency no longer controls you, manipulation loses one of its strongest entry points into your mind. Keep your values written and clear. Keeping your values written and clear is a defense that protects you from manipulation by anchoring your decisions to something deeper than emotion or circumstance. Manipulation thrives in ambiguity. When your values are undefined, flexible under pressure, or only felt rather than articulated, they become easy to bend. Written values remove that vulnerability by giving you a fixed internal reference point. When pressure rises, emotions blur priorities. Fear, desire, guilt, or urgency can make almost anything feel justifiable in the moment. A written set of values cuts through that distortion. It reminds you who you are before the pressure arrived. Instead of asking how to respond, you ask whether the situation aligns with what you've already decided matters. That shift alone blocks many manipulative tactics. Emotionally, this defense is stabilizing. Values act like psychological gravity. They keep you grounded when others attempt to pull you into their narratives, timelines, or moral frameworks. Manipulators often try to redefine what is right, necessary, or expected in the moment. Clear values prevent that rewrite. They make it harder for guilt or obligation to take root because your standards are not being invented on the fly. Writing values also exposes manipulation faster. When someone pushes you to act against your principles, the conflict becomes obvious rather than confusing. You feel the misalignment immediately, not as anxiety, but as clarity. This defense quietly strengthens self-trust. Each time you choose according to your written values, you reinforce internal consistency. Over time, others sense this stability. You become harder to pressure, harder to rush, and harder to sway because your decisions are guided by something solid that does not move when emotions rise. Separate kindness from compliance. Separating kindness from compliance is a defense that protects your empathy from being weaponized against you. Many people are conditioned to believe that being kind means being agreeable, accommodating, or self-sacrificing. Manipulators rely on this confusion. They blur the line between compassion and obligation, turning your good intentions into leverage. Kindness is an internal value. Compliance is a behavior. When the two become fused, saying no feels cruel and asserting boundaries feels selfish. This emotional distortion is powerful. Guilt becomes the price of self-protection, and relief only comes through giving in. Manipulation thrives in that space, where your identity as a good person is quietly held hostage. Emotionally, this defense challenges deep conditioning. You may feel discomfort when you don't comply, even if your refusal is reasonable. That discomfort is not evidence of wrongdoing. It is withdrawal from a learned pattern. When you allow yourself to feel it without surrendering, you begin to reclaim choice. Separating kindness from compliance also exposes intent. When someone reacts with anger, pressure, or withdrawal because you didn't comply, it reveals that kindness was never the goal. It was the entry point. Genuine kindness survives boundaries. Manipulative kindness collapses the moment it encounters them. This defense allows you to remain compassionate without self-betrayal. You can care without conceding, listen without agreeing, and empathize without giving access. Over time, this distinction reshapes how others treat you. Your kindness remains intact, but it is no longer something that can be traded, demanded, or exploited. Ask clarifying questions. Asking clarifying questions is a subtle yet powerful defense because manipulation depends on ambiguity. Vague language, implied meanings, and emotional undertones are tools used to guide you toward conclusions without ever stating them outright. When you ask for clarity, you force what is hidden into the open, and manipulation loses the shadows it needs to operate. Manipulative statements are often designed to feel meaningful without being specific. They rely on suggestion rather than substance. This triggers your mind to fill in the gaps, usually in a way that favors the other person's agenda. Clarifying questions interrupt this process. They slow the interaction and shift it from emotional interpretation to concrete understanding. Emotionally, this can feel risky. Asking for clarity may provoke irritation, defensiveness, or sudden shifts in tone from the other person. That reaction itself is information. Honest communication welcomes clarification. Manipulation resists it because clarity limits flexibility and exposes intent. When someone becomes uncomfortable the moment you ask them to explain, it signals that confusion was part of the strategy. Clarifying questions also protect you from false responsibility. When expectations are implied instead of stated, you're more likely to feel guilty for not meeting them. By asking what is actually being asked of you, you reclaim agency over your response. You replace assumptions with facts. This defense trains your mind to stay grounded. Instead of reacting to emotional cues, you respond to actual content. Over time, people learn that they cannot move you with suggestion alone. They must be honest, direct, and accountable. And in that environment, manipulation struggles to survive because it cannot thrive under scrutiny and precision. Notice emotional pressure. Noticing emotional pressure is a crucial defense because manipulation rarely forces, it squeezes. It applies invisible weight to your emotions until compliance feels like the only way to breathe again. This pressure often goes unnoticed because it doesn't look like control. It looks like disappointment, concern, urgency, or need. Yet its purpose is always the same: to push you toward a decision that benefits someone else. Emotional pressure works by making your internal state uncomfortable. Guilt tightens the chest. Fear accelerates thoughts. Sympathy blurs boundaries. The discomfort grows until action feels necessary, not because it's right, but because it promises relief. When you notice this pressure instead of reacting to it, the dynamic shifts instantly. Awareness creates separation. You stop asking, "How do I fix this feeling?" and start asking, "Why do I feel this way right now?" That question exposes the mechanism at work. Is the pressure coming from facts or from tone? From real consequences or implied ones? From your values or from someone else's expectations? Manipulators depend on your emotional confusion. When you name the pressure internally, it loses its invisibility. You realize that the urgency isn't yours. The guilt isn't earned. The fear isn't grounded in reality. It was introduced deliberately to steer you. This defense also retrains your nervous system. Instead of panicking under pressure, you become curious. You learn to sit with discomfort without needing to resolve it immediately. That ability is destabilizing to manipulation because pressure only works when it moves you. Once you can notice emotional pressure without absorbing it, you regain choice. You stop being pushed and start standing still. And in that stillness, influence collapses because there is nothing left to press against. Don't defend false accusations. Not defending false accusations is a powerful defense because false accusations are rarely about truth. They are about control. The moment you begin defending yourself against something untrue, you accept a frame that was designed to destabilize you. Manipulators use accusations to shift you into a reactive position, forcing you to prove innocence instead of questioning intent. False accusations trigger a deep emotional response. They attack identity, reputation, and self-worth. Your instinct is to explain, clarify, and correct because being misunderstood feels threatening. That urgency is exactly what fuels the tactic. When you defend, you signal that the accusation has authority over you, even when it doesn't. Silence or calm refusal to engage exposes the accusation for what it is. Without your emotional participation, the claim has no momentum. Manipulators often escalate when their accusation fails to provoke defense, revealing that their goal was reaction, not resolution. The truth does not require performance. It stands without rehearsal. Emotionally, resisting the urge to defend requires self-trust. You must tolerate the discomfort of being momentarily misjudged without rushing to fix it. That discomfort fades. What replaces it is clarity. You begin to see how often accusations were used to pull you into endless explanations, self-doubt, or compliance. This defense also protects your energy. Defending false claims drains attention and keeps you trapped in someone else's narrative. By refusing to engage, you keep control of your time, your identity, and your reality. Over time, those who rely on false accusations lose interest because there is no leverage left to pull and no reaction left to exploit. Be okay being misunderstood. Being okay with being misunderstood is a defense that dismantles one of manipulation's most reliable pressure points: your need to be seen as reasonable, good, or fair. Manipulators exploit this need by misrepresenting your words, intentions, or character, knowing you'll rush to correct the narrative. That urgency pulls you into explanation, defense, and emotional exposure. The fear of being misunderstood runs deep. Social belonging has always been tied to survival, so the brain treats misinterpretation as a threat. When someone twists your actions or frames you negatively, your instinct is to clarify, justify, or over-explain. Manipulators count on this reaction. Every explanation gives them more material to reshape and more control over the conversation. Choosing to be okay with being misunderstood short-circuits this process. It means recognizing that clarity does not require consensus. Some people are not confused. They are strategic. No amount of explanation will satisfy someone who benefits from misunderstanding you. Emotionally, this is uncomfortable. Silence can feel like guilt. Non-response can feel like surrender. But in reality, it is containment. You stop bleeding information. You stop chasing approval. You stop participating in a game where the rules keep changing. This defense also reveals truth. Those who genuinely want to understand will ask, listen, and adjust. Those who don't will escalate, accuse, or provoke. That distinction becomes visible only when you stop trying to control perception. Being okay with being misunderstood is not indifference, it is self-respect. You trust that your integrity does not require constant explanation, and in doing so, you remove one of the strongest levers manipulation has over you. Spot repetition used to wear you down. Spotting repetition used to wear you down is a crucial defense because persistence can be mistaken for truth. Manipulators often repeat the same point, complaint, or request not to clarify, but to exhaust your resistance. Over time, repetition dulls your critical thinking and replaces evaluation with fatigue. You stop assessing whether something is valid and start focusing on ending the pressure. The brain is vulnerable to repetition. Hearing the same idea again and again creates familiarity, and familiarity feels like accuracy. This is why slogans, mantras, and accusations gain power through sheer frequency. Manipulators exploit this by looping arguments, rephrasing the same demand, or revisiting the same grievance until your energy drops. The goal is not agreement through logic, but surrender through exhaustion. Emotionally, this tactic creates a sense of inevitability. You begin to feel trapped in the conversation, as if the only way out is to give in. Frustration builds, self-doubt creeps in, and clarity fades. At that point, compliance feels like relief, even if it goes against your better judgment. Recognizing the loop breaks its spell. Once you identify repetition as a tactic, the emotional pressure shifts. You realize nothing new is being added. No new facts, no new insight, no real dialogue, just the same message, delivered again to erode your resolve. That awareness restores choice. You can disengage, pause, or refuse without feeling responsible for resolving something that isn't actually progressing. This defense strengthens emotional endurance. You stop mistaking endurance tests for meaningful discussions. You learn that repetition is not persistence in truth, but persistence in control. And when you stop feeding the loop with your attention, the tactic loses its power because it cannot function without your gradual depletion. Resist, everyone thinks this. Claims. Resisting, everyone thinks this claims is a critical defense because social pressure is one of the strongest forces shaping human behavior. Humans are wired to seek belonging and avoid exclusion. When someone invokes the idea of a collective opinion, they are not offering evidence, they are triggering fear. Fear of being wrong, isolated, or left behind. These claims are rarely factual. They are vague, unprovable, and strategically timed. Everyone, most people, or any reasonable person are used to make disagreement feel abnormal. The goal isn't to convince you logically, it's to make resistance feel socially unsafe. Once that fear activates, people often abandon their own judgment to rejoin the imagined majority. Emotionally, this tactic works by outsourcing thinking. If everyone agrees, then questioning feels pointless. Doubt turns inward. You start wondering what's wrong with you instead of what's wrong with the claim. That internal shift is where manipulation takes hold, because you begin policing yourself. Resisting this doesn't require confrontation, it requires awareness. You notice the absence of specifics. Who is everyone? Where is the evidence? Why is consensus being used instead of reasoning? When you ask these questions internally, the emotional weight dissolves. This defense protects your independence of thought. Truth does not require popularity to exist. History repeatedly proves that everyone is often wrong, especially when pressure is involved. By resisting these claims, you stop mistaking repetition for reality. When you no longer fear standing apart, mass influence loses its grip. You remain grounded in your own perception rather than an imagined crowd, and manipulation that relies on conformity finds no place to anchor itself. Ground yourself physically. Breathing, posture. Grounding yourself physically is a defense that works beneath language, because manipulation first targets the body before it reaches the mind. When pressure appears, your nervous system reacts instantly. Breathing becomes shallow, muscles tense, posture collapses or stiffens, and your body prepares to comply, flee, or fight. Manipulators rely on this physiological shift because a dysregulated body produces a reactive mind. The moment you slow your breathing or adjust your posture, you interrupt that chain. Deep, controlled breaths signal safety to the nervous system, lowering emotional intensity and widening perception. Straightening your posture subtly restores a sense of stability and self-possession. These small physical actions send a powerful internal message. You are not under threat, and you do not need to rush or submit. Emotionally, grounding feels like regaining your footing in the middle of pressure, instead of being swept along by tone, urgency, or intimidation. You feel present in your body. That presence creates distance between stimulus and response. What once felt overwhelming becomes manageable. The emotional charge loses its edge because your body is no longer amplifying it. This defense is especially effective because it is invisible. You don't need to say anything or reveal resistance. While the other person pushes, your internal state stabilizes. Their words may remain the same, but their impact changes. You begin to hear manipulation as noise rather than command. Over time, grounding trains your nervous system to remain steady under pressure. You stop mistaking physiological stress for truth. Breathing and posture become anchors, keeping you rooted in control while others attempt to move you emotionally, mentally, or psychologically. Avoid justifying personal boundaries. Avoiding justification of personal boundaries is a defense that protects your autonomy from being negotiated away. A boundary is not a debate, yet manipulators treat it like an opening statement. The moment you begin justifying, you imply that your limit requires approval, explanation, or validation. That implication becomes leverage. When you explain a boundary, you hand over context, emotion, and reasoning. Manipulators don't hear the boundary, they hear the logic behind it and start attacking the logic instead. They minimize your reasons, reinterpret your feelings, or argue exceptions until the boundary weakens. What began as self-protection turns into self-defense. Emotionally, the urge to justify comes from fear of being seen as unreasonable, selfish, or unkind. That fear is learned. Many people were conditioned to earn the right to say no. Manipulation feeds on that conditioning, turning your desire for harmony into a vulnerability. A boundary does not need to be persuasive to be valid. It only needs to be clear. When you stop justifying, you stop inviting counter-arguments. Silence becomes structure. Repetition becomes strength. The absence of explanation denies manipulators the tools they need to dismantle your limits. This defense also tests sincerity. People who respect you adjust. People who seek control push harder. Their reaction tells you everything without you having to say more. Avoiding justification doesn't make you rigid or cold. It makes your boundaries stable. Over time, this trains others to understand that access to you is not earned through pressure or debate, but granted through respect, and that your limits exist because you decided they do, not because they were approved. Recognize love bombing. Recognizing love bombing is essential because manipulation often begins with intensity rather than threat. Love bombing floods you with excessive attention, affection, praise, or validation before trust has had time to develop. It feels intoxicating, disarming, and deeply affirming. That emotional high is not accidental. It is designed to create attachment before discernment can take place. The human nervous system responds powerfully to sudden closeness. When someone makes you feel seen, special, or uniquely understood very quickly, your defenses lower. Dopamine and oxytocin rise, creating a sense of safety and excitement that mimics genuine connection. Manipulators use this biological response to establish influence early, making you emotionally invested before you have enough information to evaluate their behavior. Love bombing often ignores natural pacing. Boundaries are bypassed in the name of closeness. Declarations feel premature. Promises arrive before consistency. When you slow down, the tone may shift, revealing irritation, guilt-tripping, or withdrawal. This contrast exposes the tactic. The affection was not unconditional. It was contingent on access and compliance. Emotionally, recognizing love bombing can be painful because it forces you to question something that felt good. It challenges the fantasy before it fully forms. Manipulators rely on that reluctance. They count on you wanting the feeling to be real more than wanting the truth. This defense restores grounding. You learn to value steadiness over intensity, consistency over charm. Genuine connection grows gradually and respects boundaries. Love bombing rushes, overwhelms, and binds. When you recognize the difference, you protect yourself from attachment being used as leverage and from mistaking emotional stimulation for genuine care. Decline without giving reasons. Declining without giving reasons is a powerful psychological defense because explanations create openings. When you justify a refusal, you unintentionally invite negotiation, persuasion, and pressure. Manipulation feeds on reasons. Each explanation becomes something to challenge, reframe, or dismantle until your no slowly erodes into compliance. Many people feel an emotional obligation to explain themselves. This conditioning often comes from fear of conflict, rejection, or being seen as selfish. Manipulators rely on this reflex. They know that if they can get you talking, they can start steering. A simple refusal without explanation disrupts that entire process. Emotionally, this defense can feel uncomfortable at first. Silence after saying no may trigger guilt or anxiety. That discomfort is not a sign you've done something wrong. It's the withdrawal of a learned behavior, people-pleasing. When you sit with that feeling instead of filling the space with justification, you regain authority over the interaction. Declining without reasons also clarifies power dynamics. You are not asking permission to have boundaries. You are stating them. Those with respectful intentions will accept this without protest. Those with manipulative intent often react with pressure, probing, or emotional escalation, revealing exactly why explanation was dangerous in the first place. This defense protects your autonomy because it keeps your inner logic private. Not everyone is entitled to your thought process. When your no stands on its own, it becomes final rather than conditional. Over time, this practice reshapes how others approach you. Requests become cleaner, pressure decreases, and manipulation weakens, because without reasons to attack, there is nothing left to argue against. Don't negotiate under threat. Not negotiating under threat is a defense that protects you from decisions made in fear, because threats are not invitations to dialogue. They are attempts at domination. The moment a threat enters a conversation, the balance shifts. The goal is no longer understanding or fairness, but submission. Any agreement reached under threat is not consent, it is survival. Threats trigger the nervous system instantly. Fear compresses your thinking and makes immediate relief feel more important than long-term consequences. Manipulators depend on this reaction. They introduce loss, punishment, withdrawal, or harm to force you into bargaining against your own interests. When you negotiate under threat, you validate the tactic and teach them that intimidation works. Refusing to negotiate interrupts this dynamic. It sends a clear psychological signal. Coercion will not be rewarded. This refusal doesn't require aggression or confrontation. It requires steadiness. By disengaging or delaying, you remove the leverage the threat was meant to create. Without fear-driven urgency, the manipulator loses their strongest weapon. Emotionally, this can be difficult. Threats provoke panic, anger, and desperation, all designed to push you into action. Resisting that pull means tolerating discomfort in the short term to protect yourself in the long term. That discomfort fades. What replaces it is clarity and self-respect. When you refuse to negotiate under threat, you reclaim authority over your choices. You stop trading peace for compliance. Over time, this defense reshapes how others approach you. Those who rely on pressure either escalate and expose themselves or retreat entirely. In both cases, you win because your decisions remain yours, untouched by fear and uncompromised by coercion. Watch for moving goalposts. Watching for moving goalposts is a defense that protects you from being trapped in endless effort with no resolution. Moving goalposts occur when the standards for success change the moment you meet them. You do what was asked, only to be told it's not enough, not right, or no longer the point. This tactic keeps you off balance, constantly striving, and permanently behind. Manipulators use this to maintain control without ever granting satisfaction or closure. The promise of approval, peace, or reward is always just out of reach. Emotionally, this creates exhaustion mixed with hope. You believe that if you just adjust a little more, explain better, or try harder, the tension will finally resolve. That hope is the hook. The brain responds strongly to unfinished loops. When expectations keep shifting, your focus narrows, and you become invested in fixing something that cannot be fixed. Each change feels like a misunderstanding rather than a strategy, keeping you engaged longer than logic would allow. Watching for moving goalposts means tracking consistency over time. What was agreed upon? What changed? Why did it change only after compliance? Once you see the pattern, the emotional fog lifts. You realize the issue was never performance, communication, or effort. It was control through perpetual dissatisfaction. This defense is emotionally confronting because it forces you to stop chasing fairness. It means accepting that no amount of compliance will stabilize the situation. But in that acceptance, you regain agency. When you stop playing a game where the rules keep changing, the manipulation loses momentum. You no longer measure yourself against shifting expectations, and the pressure dissolves the moment you recognize that the finish line was never meant to be reached. Maintain financial independence. Maintaining financial independence is one of the strongest defenses against manipulation because control often follows dependency. When someone has leverage over your resources, your options quietly shrink. Money is not just currency. It represents choice, mobility, and the ability to say no without fear. Manipulators understand this, which is why financial entanglement is often encouraged before trust is earned. Financial dependence creates emotional pressure, even when no words are spoken. Gratitude can turn into obligation. Help can turn into control. Decisions begin to feel conditional, filtered through the fear of loss or retaliation. You may hesitate to disagree, delay leaving, or suppress concerns because the cost feels too high. That internal restraint is the real mechanism of manipulation. Emotionally, dependence blurs boundaries. You start questioning whether your needs are reasonable or ungrateful. Manipulators exploit this confusion by framing control as generosity and restriction as responsibility. The more you rely on them, the harder it becomes to see where support ends and dominance begins. Maintaining financial independence doesn't mean rejecting help or partnership. It means preserving autonomy. Having access to your own resources allows your decisions to be guided by values rather than survival. It gives you the ability to pause, evaluate, and walk away if needed without panic. This defense quietly shifts power dynamics. When money is no longer a pressure point, emotional tactics lose much of their force. Fear-based compliance weakens. You are no longer negotiating from vulnerability, but from stability. Over time, financial independence becomes psychological independence. It reinforces self-trust, strengthens boundaries, and ensures that your consent is genuine rather than coerced by circumstance. Track inconsistencies. Tracking inconsistencies is a powerful defense because manipulation depends on short memory and emotional fog. When stories shift, details change, or explanations evolve, manipulators rely on you forgetting, doubting yourself, or prioritizing harmony over accuracy. The moment you begin noticing patterns instead of isolated moments, the illusion starts to crack. Inconsistencies rarely appear as obvious lies. They show up as small contradictions, a timeline that no longer matches, a promise that quietly disappears, a justification that changes depending on the audience. Each individual moment feels minor, easy to excuse, but together they form a shape. Manipulation lives in that gap between what was said before and what is being said now. Emotionally, this defense is challenging because it forces you to trust your perception. Many people are conditioned to override their memory when confronted with confidence or emotional pressure. You're told you misunderstood, misremembered, or took it the wrong way. Tracking inconsistencies anchors you to reality when doubt is being introduced deliberately. You don't need to confront or accuse. Observation is enough. When you internally note discrepancies, you stop being swept up by the latest version of the story. Emotional narratives lose power when they can't maintain coherence over time. This practice also protects against gaslighting. When someone attempts to rewrite history, your awareness of inconsistencies becomes an internal record that stabilizes your sense of truth. You no longer rely on their version of events to orient yourself. Over time, tracking inconsistencies sharpens intuition. You sense when something doesn't add up before you can articulate why. That quiet certainty is devastating to manipulation because control requires confusion. And when confusion disappears, so does their leverage. Pause before responding. Pausing before responding is one of the most underestimated yet powerful defenses against manipulation because it interrupts the emotional momentum manipulators rely on. Manipulation thrives on speed. It depends on catching you in a moment of surprise, pressure, fear, excitement, or guilt before your rational mind has time to engage. When you pause, even for a few seconds, you reclaim control over the interaction. The human brain has two competing systems at play. One reacts instantly and emotionally, designed to protect you from danger but easily hijacked. The other is slower, analytical, and deliberate. Manipulators aim straight for the first system, flooding it with urgency, emotional weight, or authority, so you respond reflexively. A pause forces the second system online. It creates a mental buffer where emotions settle and clarity begins to surface. This silence can feel uncomfortable, even threatening, especially if you've been conditioned to respond quickly to avoid conflict or disapproval. That discomfort is not accidental. It's often the exact pressure being applied to push you into compliance. By pausing, you expose that pressure for what it is. You begin to notice the emotional hooks, the leading language, the implied consequences hiding beneath the words. A pause also shifts power dynamics. The person attempting to influence you expects immediate engagement. When you don't give it, they often reveal more, over-explaining, escalating, or changing tactics, unintentionally exposing their intent. In that stillness, you gain information without giving anything away. Pausing is not weakness or indecision. It is emotional discipline. It signals that you are not easily moved, rushed, or controlled, and it quietly trains others to treat your attention and consent as something that must be earned rather than extracted. Ask yourself, what do they want from me? Asking yourself what someone wants from you is a psychological defense that instantly cuts through emotional fog and brings hidden motives into focus. Manipulation rarely announces itself openly. It disguises desire as concern, pressure as urgency, and self-interest as necessity. The moment you ask this question internally, you stop participating blindly and begin observing the interaction from above it. Most people are taught to listen to what is being said, not why it's being said. Manipulators exploit this by wrapping their intentions in emotional language designed to bypass logic. Praise, guilt, fear, obligation, and flattery are not random tools. They are currencies used to extract something specific: time, attention, compliance, money, validation, access, or control. When you ask what they want, the emotional charge starts to dissolve, replaced by pattern recognition. This question creates emotional distance without confrontation. You don't need to accuse or challenge. You simply analyze. Why now? Why this tone? Why this story? Why the urgency? As you hold the question in your mind, inconsistencies begin to surface. You notice when empathy feels performative, when kindness has strings attached, when pressure escalates the moment you hesitate. The most powerful aspect of this defense is how it recenters you. Instead of being pulled into their narrative, you anchor yourself in your own awareness. You stop reacting and start assessing. That shift alone breaks many manipulation attempts because influence requires your emotional participation. Over time, this question rewires your instincts. You begin to sense motives before words fully land. You feel when something is being extracted rather than shared, and in that awareness, you gain the freedom to choose rather than comply, making manipulation lose its grip before it ever tightens. Detach emotions from decisions. Detaching emotions from decisions is one of the most powerful internal defenses you can develop because manipulation feeds on emotional urgency. Strong emotions narrow perception. They compress time, distort risk, and make short-term relief feel more important than long-term consequences. When emotions take the wheel, decisions stop being choices and become reactions. Manipulators understand this deeply. They don't argue logic first. They activate feeling. Fear makes you rush. Guilt makes you comply. Excitement makes you overlook details. Anger makes you defend instead of evaluate. Once emotion is triggered, the decision is often already made before you realize it. Detaching doesn't mean suppressing emotion. It means refusing to let it dictate action. The moment you feel a spike, tightness in your chest, heat in your face, urgency in your thoughts, that is the signal to slow down. Emotional intensity is information, not instruction. When you separate the feeling from the decision, you create space to ask whether acting now truly serves you or simply relieves discomfort. That space is where control returns. This defense also protects against emotional storytelling. Manipulative narratives are designed to bypass reasoning by making you feel instead of think. When you step back and evaluate outcomes rather than emotions, the story loses its power. You begin to notice exaggeration, missing facts, and consequences that were never mentioned. Detaching emotions from decisions doesn't make you cold or unempathetic. It makes you precise. You can still feel compassion without surrendering agency. You can still care without being controlled. Over time, this practice trains your nervous system to stay steady under pressure, making emotional manipulation increasingly ineffective because there is nothing left for it to grab onto. Verify facts independently. Verifying facts independently is a defense that dismantles manipulation at its foundation, because deception cannot survive scrutiny. Manipulation relies on borrowed authority, selective information, and the assumption that you won't check. When someone controls the facts you receive, they control the conclusions you reach. The moment you step outside their narrative to verify reality for yourself, their influence weakens. Manipulators often present information with confidence, urgency, or emotional framing to discourage questioning. They imply that checking would be rude, unnecessary, or a sign of distrust. This social pressure is intentional. It keeps you dependent on their version of events. Independent verification breaks that dependency and restores your autonomy. Emotion plays a critical role here. Fear-based claims push you to act before confirming. Moral pressure makes you feel guilty for doubting. Authority makes you assume accuracy without evidence. Verifying facts requires emotional restraint, because it means tolerating uncertainty and resisting the comfort of quick answers. That discomfort is the price of clarity. When you verify independently, patterns emerge, stories change, details don't align, sources become vague. You start to notice how often certainty was an illusion, built on repetition rather than truth. Even when the information turns out to be accurate, the act of checking strengthens your position. It trains your mind to trust evidence over tone. This defense also changes how others interact with you. People who rely on manipulation tend to avoid those who verify. They sense the loss of control. Those who are honest remain unaffected. Over time, verifying facts independently becomes more than a habit. It becomes a quiet declaration that your reality is not negotiable and that access to your decisions requires truth, not persuasion. Say, "I need time to think." Saying, "I need time to think," is a psychological defense that disrupts manipulation by refusing immediacy, which is the lifeblood of control. Manipulation depends on speed. It relies on pressure, emotional intensity, and the belief that hesitation equals loss. The moment you ask for time, you remove yourself from the emotional current designed to carry you toward a decision you didn't choose consciously. This phrase does more than delay an answer. It reclaims ownership of your decision-making process. It signals that your consent is not automatic and that your mind is not accessible on demand. For manipulators, this is deeply unsettling. Time allows logic to return, emotions to stabilize, and inconsistencies to surface. What felt urgent often shrinks when given space. Emotionally, asking for time can feel risky. Many people are conditioned to fear disappointing others or being seen as difficult. That fear is frequently exploited. When someone reacts negatively to your need for time, it reveals more than words ever could. Genuine intentions respect reflection. Manipulative ones escalate pressure, introduce guilt, or threaten consequences to close the window you've opened. Time also restores perspective. Away from the conversation, your nervous system settles. You replay the interaction with clearer eyes. You notice tone shifts, emotional hooks, and unanswered questions. The spell weakens. What once felt compelling may begin to feel intrusive or unreasonable. Saying, "I need time to think," is not indecision. It is emotional sovereignty. It creates a boundary that protects your future self from decisions made under pressure. Each time you use it, you train others and yourself that your choices are deliberate, considered, and immune to urgency manufactured for someone else's benefit. Watch actions over words. Watching actions over words is a defense that protects you from emotional deception, because language is easy to manufacture while behavior is costly to fake. Manipulation often sounds convincing. It arrives wrapped in promises, explanations, apologies, and intentions designed to trigger hope, reassurance, or doubt. Words are used to shape perception. Actions reveal reality. The human brain is wired to respond to storytelling. When someone speaks confidently or emotionally, it creates a sense of meaning and trust, even when the substance is empty. Manipulators exploit this by using language to delay accountability. They explain instead of change. They promise instead of act. They apologize without adjusting behavior. When you focus on words, you stay trapped in potential. When you focus on actions, you see truth. Actions unfold over time, and that is why they are harder to manipulate. Consistent behavior exposes priorities, values, and intent far more accurately than any statement ever could. If someone claims to respect you but repeatedly ignores your boundaries, the action carries the real message. If someone says they care but disappears when effort is required, the behavior speaks louder than any reassurance. Emotionally, this defense can be uncomfortable. Letting go of words means letting go of hope built on them. It means accepting disappointment instead of clinging to explanations. That discomfort is often what manipulators rely on to keep you listening instead of observing. When you train yourself to prioritize actions, emotional confusion fades. You stop arguing with reality. You stop waiting for clarity to be spoken. Behavior becomes the evidence, and once you learn to read it, manipulation loses its voice because actions cannot lie, even when words try to. Don't accept blame without evidence. Not accepting blame without evidence is a defense that protects your identity from being slowly eroded. Manipulation often begins with accusation, not because wrongdoing occurred, but because blame creates imbalance. The moment you accept fault without proof, you step into a defensive position where justification replaces self-trust and doubt begins to take root. Emotionally, blame is powerful because it activates shame. Shame narrows awareness and creates urgency to repair, apologize, or make things right, even when you're unsure what you did wrong. Manipulators exploit this reflex. Vague accusations, disappointed tones, or implied wrongdoing are used to trigger guilt without specifics. You feel responsible before facts ever appear. Evidence restores grounding. It shifts the conversation from emotion to reality. When you ask for clarity, details, or proof, the emotional charge often weakens. Stories become inconsistent. Claims remain vague. The pressure to accept blame increases precisely because evidence is missing. This defense requires trusting your own memory and perception. Manipulation thrives when you doubt yourself. By refusing to internalize blame without verification, you interrupt that process. You acknowledge the accusation without absorbing it. That distinction is critical. Accepting responsibility when evidence exists is strength. Accepting blame without it is self-betrayal. Over time, this practice reinforces internal stability. You stop reflexively apologizing. You stop carrying guilt that was never yours. And you begin to notice how often blame was used not to resolve issues, but to control behavior. When blame no longer automatically lands, manipulation loses one of its most effective entry points. Delay important decisions. Delaying important decisions is a powerful defense because manipulation depends on urgency. Pressure compresses time, and when time feels scarce, discernment collapses. Manipulators rush you not because the decision is truly urgent, but because hesitation threatens their influence. Speed is their ally. Time is yours. Emotionally charged situations distort judgment. Fear demands immediate relief. Excitement pushes reckless commitment. Guilt pressures quick compliance. When you delay, you interrupt this emotional momentum. You allow the intensity to settle so the decision can be evaluated rather than escaped into. What feels critical in the moment often loses its force when given space. The brain changes with time. Stress chemicals fade. Perspective widens. Consequences become clearer. When you delay, you regain access to long-term thinking instead of reacting to short-term discomfort. Manipulators know this, which is why they frame delay as dangerous, selfish, or irresponsible. They imply that waiting will cause loss, rejection, or conflict. That implication is often the manipulation itself. Delaying also reveals intent. Someone acting in good faith respects your need for time. Someone seeking control escalates pressure when you hesitate. They repeat themselves, add emotional weight, or introduce artificial deadlines. That reaction exposes the tactic. The urgency was never about necessity, it was about compliance. This defense requires emotional tolerance. Sitting with uncertainty can feel uncomfortable, especially if you've been conditioned to resolve tension quickly. But that discomfort is protective. It keeps you from trading clarity for relief. Over time, delaying decisions retrains your nervous system to stay calm under pressure. When you stop allowing urgency to dictate your actions, you reclaim authority over your life. Decisions become deliberate instead of reactive, and manipulation loses its leverage because it can no longer rush you past your own judgment. Reduce exposure to manipulative people. Reducing exposure to manipulative people is one of the most effective defenses because influence weakens with distance. Manipulation is not just a tactic, it is an environment. The more time you spend around someone who distorts reality, applies pressure, or exploits emotion, the more your nervous system adapts to that distortion as normal. Manipulative individuals erode clarity gradually. They exhaust you with cycles of tension and relief, confusion and reassurance. Over time, this wears down resistance and makes you more suggestible, not because you lack intelligence, but because constant emotional friction drains cognitive energy. Distance restores perspective. Emotionally, stepping back can feel uncomfortable or even cruel. Manipulators often frame access as obligation, loyalty, or love. Guilt is used to keep the connection intact, but exposure is access, and access is power. Reducing contact limits their ability to influence your mood, thoughts, and decisions. This defense doesn't require dramatic exits or confrontation. It can be subtle, less availability, shorter interactions, fewer emotional disclosures, more space between responses. As exposure decreases, patterns become clearer. What once felt confusing starts to feel obvious. Your emotional baseline stabilizes. Distance also breaks conditioning. Without constant reinforcement of their narratives, your own values and perceptions regain strength. You begin to feel like yourself again. Decisions become easier. Doubt fades. Manipulative people often escalate when they sense distance, using urgency or emotional hooks to pull you back in. Recognizing this reaction confirms the necessity of space. Reducing exposure is not avoidance, it is protection. When someone no longer has frequent access to you, their ability to shape your reality collapses, and in that quiet space, your autonomy rebuilds itself naturally. Keep conversations factual. Keeping conversations factual is a defense that neutralizes manipulation by removing the emotional fuel it depends on. Manipulation thrives in emotional ambiguity, where feelings replace evidence and narratives override reality. When a conversation stays grounded in facts, timelines, actions, and verifiable details, there is far less room for distortion. Manipulators often steer conversations away from facts and toward emotions because emotions are easier to bend. They exaggerate tone, imply intent, or focus on how something felt rather than what actually happened. This creates confusion and invites you to defend emotions instead of addressing reality. By calmly returning to facts, you break that cycle. Emotionally, this can feel unnatural at first. You may feel cold, detached, or accused of lacking empathy. That reaction is often intentional. When facts enter the conversation, emotional leverage weakens, and manipulators may attempt to shame you back into subjective territory. Staying factual requires emotional steadiness and the willingness to tolerate discomfort without retreating. Facts provide structure. They anchor the conversation in something stable. Dates, actions, exact words, and outcomes are harder to argue with than feelings or assumptions. When you state facts without emotional charge, you deny manipulators the reactions they seek. The conversation either becomes productive or exposes itself as manipulation. This defense also protects your memory and sanity. Emotional conversations can blur reality over time, especially when someone repeatedly reframes events. Facts preserve clarity. They act as reference points you can return to when narratives shift. By keeping conversations factual, you remain grounded in reality rather than pulled into emotional spirals. You engage without surrendering control, making it increasingly difficult for anyone to twist the conversation into something that serves their agenda instead of the truth. Refuse false dilemmas. Refusing false dilemmas is a defense that protects your freedom of thought when options are artificially narrowed to force compliance. A false dilemma presents only two choices, both of which benefit the person applying pressure. Agree or you don't care. Act now or lose everything. Comply or be the problem. The illusion of choice creates urgency while hiding alternatives. Emotionally, false dilemmas work because they trigger fear and responsibility at the same time. You feel cornered, as if hesitation itself is a decision with consequences. The brain under stress seeks certainty, and when only two paths are presented, one often feels safer than the other, even if neither truly aligns with you. Manipulators rely on this narrowing effect. By framing the situation as binary, they prevent reflection, creativity, and autonomy. Nuance disappears, context is erased, your values are reduced to a test you didn't agree to take. Refusing a false dilemma means stepping outside the frame entirely. You recognize that the options presented are incomplete, misleading, or intentionally restrictive. This requires emotional regulation because the pressure to choose is often intense. Sitting with uncertainty feels dangerous when consequences are implied. Once you refuse the frame, power shifts. You regain the right to define your own response, timing, and boundaries. Often, the person applying the dilemma reacts with frustration because the leverage depended on your acceptance of the setup. This defense strengthens discernment. Over time, you become less reactive to ultimatum-style language and more comfortable exploring alternatives. When you stop accepting forced choices, manipulation loses its grip because control collapses the moment you realize there were always more options than you were shown. Know your non-negotiables. Knowing your non-negotiables is a foundational defense against manipulation because it removes ambiguity about where you end and others begin. Manipulation thrives in uncertainty. When your limits are unclear, they can be tested, stretched, reframed, and slowly eroded. Non-negotiables are the internal lines that stop that erosion before it starts. These are not preferences or moods. They are values, boundaries, and standards that protect your dignity, safety, and long-term well-being. When you haven't defined them, decisions get negotiated in moments of pressure, emotion, or fear. That is when you are most vulnerable. Manipulators don't need to overpower you. They only need you unsure of what you will and won't tolerate. Emotionally, not knowing your non-negotiables creates chronic self-doubt. You second-guess reactions. You rationalize discomfort. You explain away behavior that violates you because nothing feels concrete enough to stand on. Defining your non-negotiables removes that confusion. It gives you an internal reference point that doesn't change based on who you're with or how intense the situation feels. Once your non-negotiables are clear, pressure loses effectiveness. Guilt has less grip. Urgency sounds hollow. You no longer debate every request as if it's new. You simply check whether it crosses a line that was already drawn. That clarity short-circuits manipulation before it escalates. This defense also shifts how others treat you. People who rely on control sense firmness and pull back. People who respect you adapt. Over time, knowing your non-negotiables becomes emotional armor. It allows you to act from self-respect instead of self-defense, and it ensures that no amount of persuasion can talk you out of what you've already decided matters most. Avoid emotional exhaustion debates. Avoiding emotional exhaustion debates is a critical defense because manipulation often hides inside endless conversation. These debates are not designed to reach understanding or truth. They are designed to drain you. The longer you stay engaged, the more tired, confused, and emotionally reactive you become, until giving in feels easier than continuing. Manipulative debates loop. The same points are rephrased, goals shift, definitions change. When you answer one concern, another appears. Logic is replaced with emotion, then emotion is replaced with accusation. The discussion never resolves because resolution would end the leverage. Exhaustion is the objective. Emotionally, these debates hijack your sense of responsibility. You feel compelled to explain yourself more clearly, prove your intent, or defend your character. Each attempt costs energy. Over time, fatigue sets in and boundaries weaken. This is when concessions are extracted, not because you agree, but because you are depleted. Avoiding these debates requires recognizing when engagement stops being productive. The moment you notice repetition, circular reasoning, or escalating emotion without progress, the defense activates. You disengage, not out of defeat, but out of awareness. This can trigger guilt or fear of being seen as unreasonable. That discomfort is part of the trap. Manipulators rely on your willingness to sacrifice energy to preserve harmony. When you stop participating, the dynamic collapses. Silence, distance, or refusal to rehash the same ground restores balance. You protect your emotional reserves, which are essential for clear thinking and self-trust. When you no longer allow yourself to be worn down, manipulation loses one of its most effective strategies. Exhaustion can no longer be used as a shortcut to control because you refuse to stay in conversations designed to empty you. Don't overshare personal vulnerabilities. Not oversharing personal vulnerabilities is a critical defense because vulnerability, when given too freely or too early, becomes leverage. Manipulation often begins with intimacy. When someone encourages you to open up quickly, deeply, or emotionally, it can feel like connection, but in the wrong hands, it is data collection. Every fear, insecurity, wound, or doubt becomes a potential pressure point. Emotionally, sharing vulnerabilities releases tension and creates a sense of relief. That relief can be mistaken for trust. Manipulators exploit this by positioning themselves as understanding, supportive, or safe, while quietly storing what you reveal. Later, those same vulnerabilities may be used to induce guilt, shame, dependency, or compliance, often disguised as concern or honest feedback. Oversharing also weakens your internal boundaries. When too much of your inner world is exposed, you begin to seek reassurance externally instead of grounding yourself internally. This shifts power outward. You may start filtering decisions through how others will react rather than what is right for you, making you easier to steer emotionally. This defense does not mean closing yourself off or becoming guarded with everyone. It means being intentional. Trust should be built through consistent behavior over time, not emotional intensity in the moment. Safe people respect pacing. Manipulative people push for access. Emotionally, restraint can feel uncomfortable. You may fear appearing distant or unlikable. That fear is often conditioning, not reality. You are not obligated to make yourself emotionally accessible to earn respect or connection. By protecting your vulnerabilities, you protect your autonomy. You decide who has access to your inner world and when. Over time, this creates emotional strength because your sense of self no longer depends on how carefully others handle what you reveal. Stay curious instead of reactive. Staying curious instead of reactive is a defense that shifts you from being emotionally pulled into situations to calmly observing them. Reactivity is immediate and automatic. It's driven by emotion, habit, and threat perception. Curiosity, on the other hand, slows the moment down and turns pressure into information. Manipulators rely on your reactions. They lose leverage when you start observing instead of responding. When something triggers you, the body tightens and the mind rushes to protect, explain, or counterattack. That reaction feels justified, even necessary, but reactivity narrows perspective. It locks you into the emotional frame someone else set. Curiosity opens space. It asks why this is being said, why now, and what reaction is being sought. Emotionally, curiosity is grounding. It shifts you out of threat and into awareness. Instead of defending your position, you examine the dynamic. You notice tone, timing, repetition, and escalation. Patterns emerge that would be invisible in the heat of reaction. This defense is especially effective because it is disarming. When you respond with calm interest rather than emotion, the expected script breaks. Manipulative tactics depend on predictability. When you don't react as anticipated, the pressure often increases, revealing intent. What was subtle becomes obvious. Staying curious does not mean being naive or agreeable. It means withholding emotional investment until clarity arrives. You remain engaged without being consumed. Over time, this practice trains emotional resilience. Triggers lose their power because they no longer dictate your behavior. When curiosity replaces reactivity, you gain control without confrontation. You stop being moved by emotional hooks and start seeing situations for what they are, making manipulation increasingly ineffective the more aware and steady you become. Notice when fear is being used. Noticing when fear is being used is a vital defense because fear is one of the fastest ways to bypass reason and seize control. When fear is activated, the brain narrows focus to immediate survival. Long-term thinking fades, nuance disappears, and urgency takes over. Manipulators exploit this state by framing situations as dangerous, catastrophic, or time-sensitive, pushing you to act before you can evaluate. Fear-based manipulation often sounds protective. It warns, cautions, or looks out for your best interest. But beneath that concern is pressure. The message isn't just that something bad could happen, but that it will unless you comply. This creates a false link between obedience and safety. Once that link forms, choice feels risky and compliance feels responsible. Emotionally, fear feels convincing because it carries physical sensations. Tightness in the chest, racing thoughts, and a sense of impending loss all make the threat feel real, even when evidence is thin. Manipulators rely on this bodily reaction. They know that a frightened mind looks for relief, not truth. Recognizing fear as a tactic allows you to pause and separate imagined danger from actual risk. When you notice fear being used, questions begin to surface. What is the real likelihood? Who benefits from my fear? Why is there no space to think? These questions weaken the emotional grip. You move from panic to assessment. This defense doesn't mean ignoring danger. It means refusing to outsource your judgment to someone else's alarm. Genuine warnings invite evaluation. Manipulative fear demands obedience. Once you learn to feel the difference, fear loses its power as a weapon because awareness restores your ability to choose calmly instead of reacting in survival mode. Trust your discomfort signals. Trusting your discomfort signals is one of the most primal and reliable defenses against manipulation because discomfort is often the first truth your body detects before your mind catches up. Long before you can explain why something feels off, your nervous system has already noticed the mismatch. Manipulation begins where that signal is ignored. Discomfort doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it's subtle, a tightening in your stomach, a sense of pressure you can't name, a sudden urge to justify yourself or explain more than necessary. These sensations are not flaws or overreactions. They are data. They indicate that something in the interaction is crossing an internal boundary, even if you haven't consciously identified which one yet. Manipulators rely on you doubting these signals. They normalize discomfort, framing it as sensitivity, misunderstanding, or personal weakness. You're told you're overthinking, being dramatic, or reading too much into things. When you accept that framing, you disconnect from your internal guidance and hand over authority. Trusting discomfort means pausing instead of overriding it. It means not rushing to explain it away or fix it. When you stay with the feeling, clarity often follows. Patterns emerge. Words gain context. What felt vague becomes specific. The manipulation becomes visible. Emotionally, this defense requires courage because it may lead you away from approval, harmony, or familiarity. Discomfort often points toward truths that disrupt comfort, but ignoring it comes at a higher cost. Prolonged confusion, self-doubt, and erosion of trust in yourself. When you trust your discomfort, you rebuild self-trust. You stop needing external validation to confirm what you already sense. Over time, your signals sharpen. You recognize manipulation earlier, faster, and with less emotional drain. Discomfort is not the enemy. It is an alarm, and when you learn to listen instead of silence it, manipulation loses its ability to operate unnoticed. Learn to say nothing. Learning to say nothing is one of the most powerful defenses against manipulation because silence removes the very material manipulation needs to function. Manipulators rely on words. They depend on explanations, reactions, emotions, and justifications to steer conversations and extract control. When you say nothing, you give them nothing to work with. Silence disrupts psychological momentum. In tense or pressurized moments, people expect engagement. They expect defense, agreement, or emotional response. When none comes, the dynamic shifts. The manipulator is forced to sit with their own words, often revealing insecurity, impatience, or escalation. In that stillness, intent becomes clearer without you needing to ask a single question. Emotionally, silence can feel uncomfortable, even frightening. Many people are conditioned to fill gaps, smooth tension, or rescue conversations from awkwardness. That impulse is often exploited. Saying nothing requires emotional discipline. It means tolerating discomfort without rushing to relieve it with words that weaken your position. Silence also protects your energy and your reality. Every word you speak in a manipulative exchange risks being twisted, reframed, or used against you. By remaining quiet, you preserve clarity and prevent your own emotions from becoming tools in someone else's hands. This defense does not mean avoidance or passivity. It is intentional restraint. You are choosing not to engage in a game you did not consent to play. Over time, learning to say nothing retrains others to approach you differently. Those seeking control lose interest because without your participation, manipulation has nowhere to land and no power to grow. Don't confuse intensity with truth. Not confusing intensity with truth is a defense that protects you from emotional overwhelm disguised as certainty. Intensity feels convincing. Loud voices, strong emotions, dramatic language, and absolute statements create the illusion of correctness. The human brain is wired to associate confidence and emotional force with credibility, especially under pressure. Manipulators exploit this instinct. Intensity bypasses analysis. When someone speaks with urgency, passion, or outrage, your nervous system reacts before your reasoning engages. The emotional charge makes the message feel important, even when the substance is thin or distorted. This is how weak claims gain power through volume rather than validity. Emotionally, intensity triggers compliance through overwhelm. You feel pushed to respond, agree, or defend simply to reduce the pressure. Calm disagreement feels impossible when the other person's emotion fills the room. Manipulators use this to dominate conversations and frame dissent as ignorance or malice. Truth does not require emotional force to exist. It remains stable whether delivered softly or forcefully. When you detach intensity from accuracy, you begin evaluating content rather than delivery. You notice when facts are missing, when logic is replaced by repetition, and when emotion is used to silence questions. This defense requires emotional steadiness. Staying grounded while someone escalates can feel unnatural, even unsafe. But when you hold your center, intensity often collapses. Without a reactive audience, emotional theatrics lose momentum. Over time, this awareness sharpens discernment. You stop being swayed by how strongly something is expressed and start trusting what can be supported, verified, and sustained. When intensity no longer equals truth in your mind, manipulation loses one of its most persuasive disguises. Recognize projection. Recognizing projection is a powerful defense because it prevents you from carrying emotions, motives, and faults that were never yours. Projection occurs when someone disowns their own behaviors or feelings and assigns them to you instead. Manipulators use this to confuse, destabilize, and redirect attention away from themselves. When you don't recognize it, you start defending against accusations that reflect their inner state, not your actions. Projection often feels disorienting. You're accused of intentions you don't have, behaviors you didn't display, or emotions you're not experiencing. Yet the accusations come with conviction. This confidence can trigger self-doubt, especially if you value self-awareness. Manipulators exploit that trait, knowing you'll look inward rather than outward, questioning yourself instead of the accusation. Emotionally, projection creates a sense of imbalance. You feel blamed without clarity. Conversations shift from the original issue to defending your character. Meanwhile, the person projecting avoids accountability. The focus stays on you, keeping their behavior out of reach. This redirection is intentional. It turns your empathy into a liability. When you recognize projection, the emotional fog lifts. You begin to notice patterns. The traits you're accused of often match the other person's behavior. The intensity of the accusation outweighs the evidence. The timing appears when responsibility is being challenged. These signals reveal that the issue is not about you, but about avoidance. This defense restores self-trust. You stop internalizing misplaced blame. You respond with clarity rather than defensiveness. Over time, recognizing projection protects your identity from distortion. It keeps you grounded in reality, allowing you to engage from truth instead of absorbing narratives designed to protect someone else's ego at your expense. Limit access to your time. Limiting access to your time is a powerful defense because time is the gateway to influence. The more access someone has to you, the more opportunities they have to shape your mood, your thinking, and eventually your decisions. Manipulation rarely happens in a single moment. It unfolds through repeated exposure, gradual pressure, and constant presence. When someone has unlimited access to your time, they gain leverage. Conversations stretch longer than necessary. Issues resurface repeatedly. Emotional energy is drained through repetition and urgency. Over time, fatigue sets in, and fatigue lowers resistance. What you would never agree to when rested can start to feel reasonable when exhausted. Emotionally, many people struggle to limit time because they associate availability with kindness, loyalty, or worth. Manipulators exploit this belief. They frame constant access as closeness or necessity, making boundaries feel selfish or cruel. But access is not connection, it is proximity, and proximity without limits becomes control. Limiting access doesn't require confrontation. It begins internally. You decide when you are available, how long interactions last, and how much emotional energy you invest. Shorter responses, fewer explanations, more pauses. Time becomes intentional rather than reactive. As access decreases, something important happens. Your clarity returns. Without constant interruption, your thoughts organize themselves. You notice patterns you missed before. Emotional pressure loses momentum because it no longer has continuous contact to sustain it. People who respect you adapt to these limits. Those who rely on manipulation push back, escalate, or guilt trip, revealing exactly why access needed restriction. When your time is no longer freely available, influence weakens. By limiting access to your time, you protect your attention, your energy, and your autonomy. And when time is guarded, manipulation struggles to find a place to land. Reframe criticism. Objectively. Reframing criticism objectively is a defense that protects your self-worth while extracting useful information without absorbing emotional harm. Criticism is often delivered with emotional charge, intention, or hidden agenda. When taken personally, it can trigger shame, defensiveness, or the urge to prove yourself. Manipulators rely on that reaction because emotional destabilization makes you easier to steer. Objectively reframing criticism means separating content from delivery. You shift your focus from how it was said and how it made you feel to what, if anything, is factually useful. This immediately weakens emotional hooks. Insults lose their sting, tone loses its power. You stop reacting to perceived attack and start assessing information. Emotionally, this creates distance. Instead of feeling targeted, you feel analytical. You ask yourself whether the criticism points to a specific, verifiable behavior or outcome, or whether it is vague, exaggerated, or character-based. Manipulative criticism often lacks precision. It attacks identity rather than actions, because identity is easier to destabilize. When criticism contains truth, objective reframing allows you to use it without self-punishment. You adjust behavior without internalizing shame. When it contains manipulation, reframing exposes it. You see projection, control, or frustration disguised as feedback. This defense also restores power. You decide what enters your self-concept and what gets discarded. You no longer outsource your sense of value to the emotional tone of others. Over time, this practice builds emotional resilience. Criticism stops feeling like a threat and starts feeling like data, making it far harder for anyone to use feedback as a weapon against your confidence or autonomy. Don't chase validation. Not chasing validation is a defense that severs one of manipulation's deepest roots. The need for approval is not weakness, it's human. But when validation becomes something you seek externally, it becomes something others can control. Manipulators sense this need quickly and position themselves as the gatekeepers of reassurance, praise, or acceptance. Validation feels like relief. When someone affirms you, tension drops and self-doubt quiets. The problem is that relief is temporary, and manipulators exploit that cycle by alternating approval with withdrawal. You begin adjusting your behavior to regain what was taken, slowly drifting away from your own standards in exchange for momentary reassurance. Emotionally, chasing validation keeps you externally anchored. Your sense of worth becomes reactive, rising and falling based on feedback. This makes criticism feel devastating and praise feel addictive. Manipulation thrives in this instability because your behavior becomes predictable and steerable. Not chasing validation means allowing uncertainty about how you are perceived. That can feel uncomfortable, even threatening at first. But in that discomfort, autonomy grows. You stop performing and start choosing. You act based on alignment rather than approval. This defense also exposes intent. Those who benefit from your validation seeking often become uneasy when you stop asking, checking, or explaining. Their influence depended on your hunger for reassurance. Without it, their leverage disappears. Over time, self-validation stabilizes your emotional center. You become less reactive to praise and less shaken by disapproval. When validation is no longer something you chase, it becomes something you can receive freely without cost. and manipulation loses its grip because there is nothing left to withhold. Watch for conditional affection. Watching for conditional affection is essential because manipulation often disguises itself as love, approval, or care that must be earned. Conditional affection is given as a reward and withdrawn as punishment. It feels warm when you comply and cold when you don't. This emotional contrast trains behavior without ever needing explicit threats. Humans are deeply sensitive to acceptance and rejection. When affection is tied to obedience, your nervous system learns to prioritize keeping the bond intact over staying true to yourself. Manipulators exploit this by creating an unspoken rule. You are valued when you agree, agreeable, useful, or silent. The moment you assert boundaries or express disagreement, warmth disappears. Confusion sets in, and you instinctively try to restore closeness by self-correcting. Emotionally, this dynamic is powerful because it mirrors early attachment patterns. Praise feels like safety. Withdrawal feels like danger. Over time, you may begin anticipating displeasure before it happens, adjusting your behavior preemptively. This is how control becomes internalized. The manipulator no longer has to enforce anything. You do it for them. Recognizing conditional affection requires paying attention to patterns rather than moments. Does care remain steady when you say no? Is affection consistent even when you disappoint? Or does it fluctuate based on compliance? These answers reveal the truth behind the connection. This defense is uncomfortable because it challenges the idea that love should be earned through sacrifice. But genuine care does not vanish when boundaries appear. When you recognize conditional affection, you reclaim emotional freedom. You stop chasing approval and start valuing consistency. In that clarity, affection loses its power as leverage because your worth is no longer dependent on someone else's mood or approval. Resist pity manipulation. Resisting pity manipulation is a vital defense because compassion, when weaponized, can override boundaries faster than fear or force. Pity manipulation works by triggering your empathy and turning it into obligation. Someone presents themselves as helpless, mistreated, or uniquely burdened so that saying no feels cruel rather than reasonable. Emotionally, this tactic is powerful because humans are wired to alleviate suffering. When you witness distress, your nervous system moves toward repair. Manipulators exploit this instinct by exaggerating vulnerability or repeatedly placing themselves in crises that require your intervention. Over time, you begin to feel responsible for stabilizing their emotional state. The danger lies in how pity blurs accountability. Patterns get excused. Harmful behavior is reframed as understandable. Boundaries dissolve under the weight of sympathy. You start managing problems that are not yours to carry, while your own needs quietly disappear. Resisting pity manipulation does not mean becoming cold or uncaring. It means separating empathy from responsibility. You can acknowledge someone's pain without agreeing to fix it. You can care without surrendering your time, energy, or autonomy. When you hold that line, the emotional pressure begins to fade. Manipulators often intensify their distress when pity stops working. The story becomes more dramatic. The urgency increases. This escalation is revealing. Genuine vulnerability respects limits. Manipulative vulnerability resents them. By resisting pity manipulation, you reclaim your emotional agency. You stop being moved by suffering that is used as leverage rather than shared honestly. Over time, this defense strengthens self-respect and clarity, allowing compassion to remain genuine instead of coerced, and preventing empathy from becoming the very tool used to control you. Be okay disappointing others. Being okay with disappointing others is a powerful defense because manipulation often feeds on your fear of letting people down. The desire to be liked, approved of, or seen as good makes you vulnerable to pressure disguised as expectation. Manipulators exploit this by framing their wants as needs and your boundaries as betrayals. Disappointment triggers deep emotional discomfort. It activates guilt, shame, and anxiety, especially in people conditioned to prioritize harmony over self-respect. That discomfort pushes you to overextend, comply, or abandon your own needs to restore emotional balance. When you become okay with disappointing others, you remove one of the strongest levers used to control you. Emotionally, this defense requires a shift in identity. You stop seeing yourself as responsible for managing other people's feelings. You recognize that disappointment is a natural outcome of differing needs, not a moral failure. When someone reacts strongly to your boundary, that reaction reveals their expectations, not your wrongdoing. Manipulators often escalate when they sense your discomfort. They emphasize sacrifice, loyalty, or obligation to pull you back into compliance. By holding steady, you expose the imbalance. Healthy people adjust. Manipulative ones intensify pressure, making their intent clearer. This defense also restores internal alignment. Each time you choose honesty over approval, your self-trust grows. You learn that relationships built on constant accommodation are fragile and conditional, while those that survive disappointment are genuine. Being okay with disappointing others does not make you unkind. It makes you free. You stop trading your well-being for acceptance and start making decisions rooted in self-respect rather than fear of rejection. Identify scapegoating. Identifying scapegoating is a defense that protects you from absorbing blame that was never meant to be fair. Scapegoating occurs when responsibility, frustration, or failure is displaced onto one person to relieve pressure elsewhere. It simplifies complex problems by assigning them a single target, and manipulators use it to redirect accountability away from themselves or uncomfortable truths. Emotionally, scapegoating is powerful because it isolates. When you're positioned as the problem, doubt creeps in. You begin reviewing your actions, questioning your intentions, and carrying weight that doesn't belong to you. The desire to restore harmony pushes you to accept blame just to make the tension stop. Manipulators rely on this reflex. By repeatedly framing you as the source of issues, they condition you to self-monitor excessively while others escape scrutiny. Over time, your confidence erodes, and the dynamic becomes lopsided. You are always defending, fixing, or apologizing, while the real causes remain untouched. Identifying scapegoating requires stepping back and examining patterns. Who benefits from the blame? Who avoids responsibility? Does the accusation solve anything, or does it simply assign fault? When the same person is consistently targeted regardless of context, the pattern becomes clear. This defense is emotionally confronting because it challenges group narratives and authority. But once you see scapegoating for what it is, its power diminishes. You stop internalizing collective frustration and start protecting your sense of reality. When blame no longer automatically lands on you, manipulation loses its ability to offload discomfort. You regain clarity, self-trust, and the freedom to step out of roles that were never yours to carry. Keep receipts, mentally or literally. Keeping receipts is a critical defense against manipulation because memory is often the first thing under attack. Manipulators rely on confusion, denial, and rewritten narratives to destabilize your sense of reality. When events are not anchored in facts, they become easy to distort. Receipts, whether mental notes or written records, protect you from being talked out of what you experienced. This tactic targets trust in yourself. You're told things didn't happen the way you remember. Words are denied, promises are reinterpreted, reactions are blamed on you rather than the trigger. Over time, this creates self-doubt. You begin questioning your perception, your memory, even your sanity. That doubt is the opening manipulation needs. Emotionally, having receipts restores grounding. You no longer have to argue from feeling alone. You can recall timelines, patterns, and exact statements. This clarity doesn't always need to be shared. Often, its greatest power is internal. It prevents you from being emotionally overpowered by confident denial or gaslighting. Keeping receipts also shifts how you process interactions. Instead of reacting immediately, you observe. You notice consistency or the lack of it. Patterns emerge that single conversations can hide. You stop being pulled into circular debates because you recognize repetition, deflection, and revision as tactics rather than misunderstandings. This defense is not about obsession or revenge. It's about self-protection. When reality is documented, it becomes harder to erase. Over time, keeping receipts strengthens self-trust. You stop relying on someone else to validate what happened. And when you trust your own record of events, manipulation loses one of its most effective weapons, the ability to make you doubt yourself. Step away when conversations loop. Stepping away when conversations loop is a crucial defense because repetitive dialogue is often used to exhaust, confuse, and wear down resistance. When the same points are recycled without resolution, the goal is rarely understanding. It is erosion. Manipulation thrives in circular conversations where progress is impossible, but engagement is constant. These loops drain emotional and mental energy. Each repetition pulls you deeper into frustration, self-doubt, or the urge to finally concede just to end the discomfort. Over time, clarity fades, and compliance begins to feel like relief. This is not accidental. Emotional exhaustion lowers defenses and makes unreasonable demands feel negotiable. Manipulators use loops to keep you focused on the surface while avoiding accountability. The topic shifts slightly, the blame is reframed, the promise is reworded, but nothing actually changes. You're kept responding, explaining, and defending while they maintain control of the direction. Stepping away interrupts this dynamic instantly. It removes the fuel the loop depends on, your attention. Emotionally, this can feel unsettling, especially if you've been conditioned to resolve issues immediately. But unresolved loops are not problems to solve, they are traps to exit. Distance restores clarity. Away from the repetition, your nervous system settles. You recognize how little progress was actually being made. What felt urgent often reveals itself as manipulation through persistence rather than substance. This defense doesn't require winning the argument. It requires recognizing when the conversation is no longer productive. When you step away, you stop rewarding repetition with engagement. Over time, manipulators lose interest when loops no longer yield control. By stepping away, you protect your energy, preserve your clarity, and deny manipulation the exhaustion it relies on to succeed. Don't personalize manipulative behavior. Not personalizing manipulative behavior is a critical defense because manipulation is rarely about you as an individual. It is about access, control, and patterns that would be applied to anyone in your position. When you take manipulative behavior personally, you internalize responsibility for something that was never caused by you, making the manipulation more effective. Emotionally, personalization triggers self-doubt. You begin asking what you did wrong, what you missed, or how you could have handled things better. This inward turn keeps your attention off the manipulator's behavior and locked onto your own perceived flaws. Manipulators benefit from this shift because self-blame weakens boundaries and increases compliance. When you detach the behavior from your identity, clarity returns. You start seeing repetition instead of intention, strategy instead of emotion. The same guilt tactics, pressure, or narratives appear regardless of context. That recognition breaks the illusion that the situation is unique or your fault. This defense also protects your self-worth. Manipulative behavior often includes subtle insults, blame shifting, or emotional invalidation designed to lower your confidence. By refusing to personalize it, you prevent those messages from embedding. You recognize them as tools, not truths. Emotionally, this can feel like stepping back from a story you were pulled into. The intensity fades. You stop defending yourself against implied accusations and start observing behavior objectively. That observation gives you choice. Over time, not personalizing manipulation builds emotional resilience. You no longer feel compelled to fix, appease, or explain yourself. The behavior loses its sting because it no longer defines you. What remains is awareness, and awareness is what ultimately dissolves control. Question, "You owe me" narratives. Questioning "you owe me" narratives is a defense that protects your autonomy from being quietly traded for guilt. These narratives frame obligation as morality and compliance as repayment. Past favors, sacrifices, or kindness are invoked not as memories, but as leverage. The message is subtle but heavy. You are in debt, and it's time to pay. Emotionally, this tactic works because it activates loyalty and shame at the same time. You don't want to be ungrateful, selfish, or disloyal. The discomfort of saying no feels like a moral failure rather than a personal choice. Manipulators rely on this confusion, turning generosity into a contract you never agreed to sign. When you question these narratives, you begin separating voluntary kindness from enforced obligation. Genuine generosity does not keep score. It does not resurface only when something is needed. When past actions are weaponized, the intent shifts from care to control. This defense requires emotional courage. You may feel selfish for even questioning the claim, but guilt is not evidence of debt. It is often the residue of pressure. By asking yourself when the obligation was agreed upon and whether it is mutual, clarity replaces confusion. Questioning "you owe me" narratives also reveals patterns. Are favors offered freely or strategically? Is help conditional? Does gratitude ever suffice, or is repayment always escalating? When you stop accepting invisible debts, you reclaim choice. Relationships become exchanges of respect rather than transactions of control. Manipulation loses power when obligation must be explicit, mutual, and freely chosen instead of emotionally enforced. Recognize victim playing. Recognizing victim playing is essential because manipulation often wears the mask of suffering. Victim playing occurs when someone consistently presents themselves as wronged, helpless, or misunderstood in order to avoid accountability and extract sympathy, compliance, or control. The emotional pull is strong because humans are wired to respond to distress and alleviate pain. This tactic shifts the power dynamic quietly. Instead of addressing behavior, the focus moves to their feelings. Any concern you raise becomes an attack. Any boundary you set becomes cruelty. You are no longer allowed to have needs without being framed as the cause of their suffering. This creates emotional paralysis, where speaking up feels morally wrong. Emotionally, victim playing triggers guilt and responsibility. You begin monitoring your words, suppressing frustration, and minimizing your experiences to protect them. Manipulators rely on this imbalance. By positioning themselves as fragile, they gain leverage without appearing dominant. Control is achieved through pity rather than force. A key sign of victim playing is repetition without resolution. The same grievances resurface, yet nothing changes. Solutions are rejected. Responsibility is deflected. The narrative stays intact because it serves a purpose. Growth would remove the leverage. Recognizing this pattern restores clarity. You notice when suffering is used as a shield rather than a state to move through. You realize that empathy does not require self-sacrifice. Pain explains behavior, but it does not excuse harm. This defense is emotionally difficult because it challenges your compassion. But true care includes honesty and accountability. When you recognize victim playing, you stop being pulled into emotional rescues and start relating from balance. In that space, manipulation loses its grip because sympathy can no longer be used to override your boundaries or silence your truth. Stay consistent in boundaries. Staying consistent in boundaries is a powerful defense because inconsistency invites testing. Manipulators are highly attentive to patterns, especially moments of flexibility that can be exploited later. One exception becomes a precedent. One moment of guilt-driven compromise becomes an opening. Consistency closes that door. Boundaries are not just limits you set, they are signals you send. When those signals change depending on mood, pressure, or persistence, they teach others that your no is temporary. Manipulation thrives on this uncertainty. It encourages repeated attempts, escalations, and emotional tactics designed to catch you on a weaker day. Emotionally, consistency can feel harsh. You may feel rigid, unkind, or afraid of losing connection. Manipulators amplify these fears, framing boundaries as rejection or punishment. This pressure is designed to make you bend. When you hold firm, even when it's uncomfortable, you disrupt the conditioning that says your needs are negotiable. Consistency also stabilizes your nervous system. Each time you uphold a boundary, your body learns that discomfort passes without catastrophe. You don't need to rescue others from disappointment. You don't need to justify yourself repeatedly. Over time, the emotional charge around boundaries fades. This defense also reveals intent. People with respect adapt. People who seek control push harder, test limits, or attempt to guilt you into exceptions. Their reaction confirms why consistency is necessary. When boundaries remain steady, manipulation loses leverage. There is no confusion, no opening, no variable to exploit. You become predictable in the one way that matters. Your self-respect does not fluctuate. And in that stability, influence based on pressure simply stops working. Avoid explaining emotions to manipulators. Avoiding the explanation of your emotions to manipulators is a powerful defense because emotions, once explained, become negotiable. When you articulate how you feel to someone who is not acting in good faith, you give them a map of your inner world. Manipulators do not seek understanding, they seek leverage. Emotional explanations provide both. Explaining emotions creates the illusion of resolution, but often deepens control. Manipulators listen not to empathize, but to reframe, minimize, or weaponize what you share. Your feelings may be dismissed as irrational, exaggerated, or used later to induce guilt or compliance. What began as vulnerability becomes a point of pressure. Emotionally, the urge to explain comes from a desire to be understood. That desire is human, but manipulators exploit it by positioning themselves as the judge of whether your feelings are valid. When you explain, you implicitly ask for recognition. When they withhold it, confusion and self-doubt grow. By not explaining, you protect emotional boundaries. You allow your feelings to exist without justification or approval. This removes the manipulator's ability to debate your internal experience. Silence or simple statements create containment rather than exposure. This defense also preserves clarity. Emotional explanations often pull you into circular conversations where nothing is resolved and control slowly shifts away from you. Avoiding that trap keeps interactions grounded and limited. Over time, this practice strengthens self-trust. You learn that your emotions do not require translation for someone committed to misunderstanding them. By keeping your emotional world private, you deny manipulators access to the very information they rely on to influence, confuse, or control you. Don't accept responsibility for others' feelings. Not accepting responsibility for others' feelings is a defense that protects you from emotional control disguised as sensitivity. While empathy allows connection, manipulation blurs empathy into obligation. You are made to feel accountable not just for your actions, but for how someone else feels about them. That shift turns emotions into leverage. Emotionally, this tactic is powerful because it triggers caretaking instincts. When someone expresses distress, disappointment, or hurt, your reflex may be to fix it. Manipulators exploit this by framing their emotions as consequences of your behavior, even when your actions were reasonable or necessary. You begin adjusting yourself to regulate their inner state. This defense requires recognizing a critical distinction. You are responsible for your behavior, not for another person's emotional interpretation of it. Feelings arise from many sources: past experiences, expectations, insecurities, and perceptions you do not control. When you accept responsibility for them, you surrender agency and invite ongoing manipulation. The pressure often escalates subtly. Disappointment becomes accusation. Hurt becomes blame. Emotional reactions are presented as proof of wrongdoing. When you absorb this responsibility, boundaries erode because any limit can be framed as harm. Not accepting responsibility does not mean being dismissive or unkind. You can acknowledge someone's feelings without owning them. You can listen without fixing. You can care without changing yourself to stabilize another person's emotions. Over time, this defense strengthens emotional clarity. You stop managing reactions that aren't yours and start acting in alignment with your values. When others' feelings are no longer tools of control, manipulation loses its emotional anchor and your autonomy remains intact. Notice when logic is replaced with emotion. Noticing when logic is replaced with emotion is a powerful defense because manipulation often begins at the moment reasoning is abandoned. Emotional appeals are not inherently wrong, but when feelings are used to override facts, evidence, or consistency, influence quietly turns into control. Manipulators steer conversations away from what makes sense and toward what feels overwhelming. This shift often happens suddenly. A discussion that began with facts turns into accusations, tears, outrage, or moral pressure. The emotional intensity rises just as clarity starts to form. This is not coincidence. Emotion floods the nervous system, making it harder to think, remember details, or evaluate contradictions. Once logic is drowned out, the loudest feeling wins. Emotionally, this tactic feels destabilizing. You may feel cruel for wanting facts or defensive for asking reasonable questions. Manipulators frame logic as cold and emotion as truth, forcing you to choose between being rational and being good. That false choice is the trap. It makes you abandon clarity in order to preserve connection or avoid conflict. When you notice this replacement happening, control shifts back to you. You realize the conversation is no longer about resolution, but about emotional dominance. Facts haven't changed, only the temperature of the room has. That awareness allows you to slow down, disengage, or re-anchor the discussion in reality. This defense doesn't mean dismissing feelings. It means refusing to let emotion dictate outcomes without examination. Feelings inform, but they do not decide. Once you recognize when emotion is being used to overpower logic, you stop being swept along by intensity and start responding from steadiness. In that steadiness, manipulation loses its force because it cannot thrive without emotional chaos. Trust your memory. Trusting your memory is a crucial defense because manipulation often begins by destabilizing your sense of reality. When someone repeatedly questions what you recall, minimizes events, or confidently rewrites history, The goal is not clarification, it is erosion. Once you doubt your own memory, you become easier to guide, correct, and control. Memory is closely tied to identity. When it's undermined, you start outsourcing truth to whoever speaks with the most certainty. Manipulators exploit this by insisting things didn't happen the way you remember, or at all. Over time, this creates confusion and self-doubt. You stop trusting your internal record and begin relying on theirs. Emotionally, this is deeply unsettling. Doubting your memory makes you feel unstable and dependent. You replay conversations, question your reactions, and wonder if you're being unfair or irrational. This mental loop drains confidence and weakens boundaries, which is exactly what manipulation requires to thrive. Trusting your memory doesn't mean claiming perfection. It means honoring patterns over isolated details. You remember how things felt, how often they happened, and how they affected you. Those impressions matter. They are not random. When something consistently leaves you confused or hurt, that consistency is itself a form of truth. This defense anchors you in yourself. Instead of arguing over details, you stay grounded in what you know you experienced. Manipulative narratives lose power when they can't replace your internal reference point. Over time, trusting your memory restores self-trust. You stop seeking constant confirmation. You become harder to gaslight because your reality has a stable center. And when your memory is no longer negotiable, manipulation loses one of its most effective tools. Recognize silent treatment as control. Recognizing the silent treatment as control is a crucial defense, because silence, when weaponized, is not absence, it is pressure. The silent treatment is designed to create emotional instability by withdrawing communication, affection, or acknowledgement until you feel anxious enough to chase resolution. It is not about space or reflection, it is about leverage. Emotionally, the silent treatment activates fear of abandonment and rejection. Your mind fills the gap with self-blame, replaying conversations and searching for mistakes. That internal chaos is intentional. Manipulators rely on your discomfort to push you into apologizing, over-explaining, or conceding boundaries just to restore connection. When you recognize this pattern, the dynamic changes. You stop interpreting silence as something you must fix. Instead, you see it as a tactic meant to shift power. This awareness breaks the emotional loop. The silence loses its threat because you no longer chase it with urgency or guilt. This defense also protects your dignity. Engaging with the silent treatment often means rewarding withdrawal with compliance. By not reacting, you refuse to reinforce the behavior. Healthy communication returns when both parties are willing to engage openly, not when one punishes the other into submission. Emotionally, resisting the pull to pursue can be difficult. The discomfort is real, but it fades. What replaces it is self-respect and clarity. You learn that connection should not require emotional starvation. Over time, recognizing the silent treatment as control reshapes your responses. You stop begging for engagement and start valuing mutual respect. Without your emotional participation, the tactic loses power, and silence becomes just silence, not a tool of influence. Practice emotional neutrality. Practicing emotional neutrality is a defense that removes the emotional fuel manipulation depends on. Manipulators thrive on reaction. Anger, guilt, excitement, fear, and defensiveness are not side effects. They are objectives. Emotional neutrality interrupts this by keeping your internal state steady regardless of external pressure. Emotionally charged responses signal vulnerability. They tell others where your triggers are and how to pull you off balance. Emotional neutrality doesn't mean you feel nothing. It means you choose not to broadcast or act from those feelings in the moment. You allow emotions to exist internally without letting them dictate your behavior. This is powerful because manipulation often escalates when it senses resistance. Neutrality creates a psychological wall. Without visible reaction, tactics lose direction. Provocation falls flat. Guilt loses its grip. Drama has nowhere to land. Internally, this requires regulation. Your body may still react, your thoughts may still race, but you remain composed outwardly. That composure gives your rational mind time to assess what's happening instead of being swept into it. Emotional neutrality turns interactions into data rather than threats. Manipulators often respond to neutrality with frustration or escalation. This reaction is revealing. When emotion is no longer rewarded, intent becomes clearer. What was hidden behind charm or pressure surfaces quickly when it stops working. Practicing emotional neutrality also strengthens self-trust. You learn that you don't need to match intensity to be heard or react to be respected. Calm becomes your baseline rather than your defense. Over time, neutrality reshapes your presence. You become harder to read, harder to provoke, and harder to control. When emotional hooks stop working, manipulation loses momentum because it depends entirely on your participation to stay alive. Don't reward bad behavior with attention. Not rewarding bad behavior with attention is a powerful defense because attention is often the true currency of manipulation. Many harmful behaviors are not driven by logic or need, but by the desire to provoke a reaction. When attention is granted, even in the form of arguing, explaining, or defending yourself, the behavior is reinforced and encouraged to continue. Manipulators quickly learn what triggers engagement. Anger, drama, disrespect, or exaggeration are used to pull you into emotional responses. Once you react, the behavior has succeeded. The focus shifts away from the issue and toward managing the emotional chaos they've created. Your energy becomes the reward. Emotionally, withholding attention can feel unnatural. You may feel rude, dismissive, or guilty for not responding. Manipulators rely on that discomfort. They frame engagement as responsibility and silence as cruelty. But attention given under pressure is not kindness, it is compliance. When you stop rewarding bad behavior, patterns become clear. The behavior often escalates briefly, seeking the old response. When that escalation fails, it either fades or reveals its true intent. Someone acting in good faith adjusts. Someone seeking control intensifies. That contrast provides clarity without confrontation. This defense requires emotional discipline. It means tolerating temporary discomfort to avoid long-term damage. You are not ignoring needs. You are refusing to reinforce harm. Over time, your nervous system learns that you don't have to engage to be safe or valid. When bad behavior no longer produces attention, it loses its function. Manipulation weakens because it thrives on reaction. By choosing where your attention goes, you reclaim power over your emotional space and teach others that access to you is earned through respect, not disruption. Spot triangulation. Spotting triangulation is a critical defense because it reveals manipulation that hides behind other people. Triangulation occurs when someone brings a third party into a situation to apply pressure, create insecurity, or control the narrative without confronting you directly. Instead of speaking for themselves, they speak through others. This tactic works by activating comparison and fear. You're told what someone else thinks, feels, or said about you, often without context or verification. Suddenly, you're no longer responding to one person, but to an invisible audience. This shifts your focus from truth to approval. Your energy moves toward defending yourself or adjusting behavior to regain standing. Emotionally, triangulation destabilizes because it isolates. You feel judged without the ability to respond. You're placed in competition you never agreed to enter. Manipulators exploit this discomfort to steer your choices, using phrases that imply consensus or authority while avoiding accountability. Spotting triangulation means noticing when communication stops being direct. Why is this being relayed instead of discussed openly? Why is a third party being used to influence your emotions? When you ask these questions internally, the structure of the manipulation becomes visible. This defense restores clarity by collapsing the triangle. You stop engaging with secondhand opinions and imagined judgments. You refuse to adjust your behavior based on unverifiable claims. Manipulators often resist direct communication because it removes their leverage. Emotionally, recognizing triangulation returns your sense of grounding. You are no longer reacting to shadows. You regain control over your self-perception and decisions. When triangulation is exposed, its power dissolves. Influence that relies on indirect pressure cannot survive direct awareness, and once you see the triangle, you no longer stand inside it. Refuse to compete for approval. Refusing to compete for approval is a powerful defense because competition is often manufactured to control behavior. Manipulators create scarcity around validation, affection, or recognition, subtly positioning themselves as the judge and others as rivals. The moment you start competing, your focus shifts from your values to winning acceptance, and control quietly changes hands. Emotionally, approval seeking activates insecurity. You begin monitoring how you're perceived, adjusting behavior, and comparing yourself to others. This keeps you externally oriented, constantly scanning for cues about where you stand. Manipulators exploit this by withholding approval, offering it conditionally, or distributing it unevenly to maintain dominance. When you refuse to compete, the entire structure collapses. You stop playing a game designed to exhaust you. Validation loses its leverage because you no longer treat it as a reward that must be earned through performance or sacrifice. This refusal restores internal authority. Emotionally, stepping out of competition can feel risky. You may fear being ignored, replaced, or devalued. That fear is often what kept you competing in the first place. When you tolerate that discomfort, you discover something stabilizing. Your worth does not fluctuate based on someone else's attention. This defense also reveals intent. Healthy relationships do not require rivalry for approval. Manipulative dynamics do. When you stop competing, those dynamics become visible. Pressure increases or interest fades, both of which provide clarity. Over time, refusing to compete for approval strengthens self-respect. You engage from choice, not hunger. Without your participation, approval-based control loses its grip because there is no longer anything to win, chase, or prove. Observe tone changes during resistance. Observing tone changes during resistance is a defense that reveals intent the moment pressure stops working. Tone is often more honest than words. When you comply, voices stay calm, friendly, or supportive. When you resist, tone shifts, patience fades, warmth cools, and subtle irritation or aggression appears. That change is not accidental. Manipulators rely on tone as a control mechanism. A pleasant tone rewards compliance. A sharper tone punishes resistance. This conditioning happens quickly and often unconsciously. When you notice the shift, you begin to see how emotional signals are being used to steer your behavior. Emotionally, tone changes trigger self-doubt. You may feel like you've done something wrong simply because the emotional atmosphere changed. That discomfort pushes many people to backtrack, explain, or give in just to restore harmony. Manipulators count on this reflex. Observing instead of reacting changes everything. When you mentally note the shift, you stop personalizing it. You recognize it as feedback, not truth. The irritation isn't proof you're wrong, it's evidence that control is slipping. This defense also exposes conditional behavior. If respect, kindness, or patience disappear the moment you assert yourself, they were never unconditional. They were tools. Tone becomes a diagnostic signal. revealing whether the interaction is built on mutual respect or leverage. Practicing this awareness sharpens emotional intelligence. You learn to trust subtle cues rather than explanations that come later. Over time, tone changes stop pulling you into compliance. They become information, not pressure. When you observe tone shifts calmly, manipulation loses its ability to hide behind politeness, because the moment resistance appears, the mask slips, and the truth becomes audible. Avoid proving your worth. Avoiding the need to prove your worth is a crucial defense, because manipulation often begins by making you feel insufficient. When your value feels uncertain, you become vulnerable to anyone who positions themselves as the judge. Manipulators exploit this by creating subtle doubt, then offering approval as something to be earned through effort, sacrifice, or compliance. The moment you feel the urge to justify yourself, explain your value, or demonstrate that you're good enough, a power shift has already occurred. Your energy moves outward, chasing validation instead of standing in self-trust. Manipulators thrive in this space. They raise the bar just enough to keep you striving, never settling, always trying to earn what should never have been conditional. Emotionally, this dynamic is exhausting. You work harder, give more, tolerate less respect, all in the hope that consistency will eventually be recognized. But recognition keeps moving. The standard changes. What once impressed becomes expected. This keeps you invested while the other person retains control. Avoiding this trap requires recognizing that worth is not established through performance. You do not need to convince anyone of your value to deserve respect. The moment you stop auditioning for acceptance, manipulation loses one of its strongest levers. There is nothing left to bargain with. This defense can feel uncomfortable because it removes familiar scripts. You may feel exposed without explanations or proofs, but that discomfort is grounding. It reconnects you to inherent worth rather than conditional approval. When you stop proving yourself, interactions change. Those who relied on your insecurity lose influence. Those who respect you remain. Over time, avoiding the need to prove your worth stabilizes your identity. You act from confidence instead of defense, and manipulation fails because it can no longer threaten something you already know is intact. Don't accept rewritten history. Not accepting rewritten history is a vital defense, because control over the past becomes control over the present. When someone alters what happened, minimizes events, or reframes their behavior after the fact, they are not clarifying. They are reshaping reality to protect themselves or gain leverage over you. If they can redefine the past, they can dictate how you feel, react, and decide now. Rewritten history often arrives calmly and confidently. Details are softened. Harmful actions are reframed as misunderstandings. Promises quietly vanish. You're told you're remembering wrong, exaggerating, or being too sensitive. Emotionally, this creates confusion and self-doubt. You begin questioning your perception instead of the manipulation taking place. This tactic works because humans crave coherence. When someone offers a neat revision of events, your mind wants to accept it to restore emotional stability. But that stability is false. It comes at the cost of your self-trust. Each time you accept a rewritten version, you move further away from your own lived experience. Refusing this manipulation doesn't require debate or proof. It requires inner certainty. You don't need to convince them of what happened. You need to honor that you remember it. Patterns matter more than isolated details. How you were treated repeatedly matters more than how they describe it now. Emotionally, this defense is grounding. It stops the internal tug-of-war between what you felt and what you're being told to believe. You choose continuity over confusion. When rewritten history no longer works on you, manipulation loses its ability to destabilize you over time. Your past becomes anchored, your present becomes clearer, and your reality stops being negotiable. Keep a long-term perspective. Keeping a long-term perspective is a powerful defense because manipulation almost always targets the present moment. It narrows your focus until immediate relief, comfort, or approval feels more important than future consequences. When your vision is shortened, short-term gains are used to quietly trade away long-term well-being. Manipulators exploit emotional immediacy. They push you to decide now, react now, fix this now, because urgency compresses time and blurs outcomes. Fear, desire, guilt, or pressure make the future feel abstract while the present feels overwhelming. A long-term perspective restores balance by widening your mental frame beyond the emotional spike. Emotionally, this shift is grounding. You stop asking how to end discomfort quickly and start asking where this path leads. Patterns become visible. You notice whether compliance today creates expectation tomorrow, whether silence now trains disrespect later, whether sacrificing yourself in the moment builds resentment over time. Manipulation weakens when you measure consequences in months and years instead of minutes. This defense also stabilizes identity. When you think long-term, decisions align with who you want to become, not who you need to be in order to avoid conflict right now. You stop reacting to emotional hooks and start choosing continuity and self-respect. Emotionally, holding the long view requires patience. It means tolerating temporary discomfort to avoid permanent damage. That patience is power. Over time, keeping a long-term perspective transforms pressure into perspective. What once felt urgent becomes temporary, and what once felt difficult becomes clearly necessary, making manipulation far less effective because its influence rarely survives time. Learn common manipulation tactics. Learning common manipulation tactics is a defense that replaces confusion with clarity. Manipulation is most effective when it feels personal, random, or unique to you. In reality, most manipulative behaviors follow predictable patterns. When you recognize those patterns, the emotional impact weakens because the behavior stops feeling mysterious and starts feeling mechanical. Emotionally, manipulation disorients. You feel unsure of what's happening, why you're reacting the way you are, or whether you're overthinking. That uncertainty keeps you engaged and self-doubting. Knowledge interrupts that loop. The moment you can name a tactic, its power drops. Gaslighting becomes visible. Guilt tripping becomes obvious. Love bombing loses its magic. Manipulators rely on ignorance, not intelligence. You don't need to be naive to be manipulated. You only need to be unfamiliar with the playbook. Once you learn common tactics, emotional hooks stop feeling personal. You realize the reaction was designed, not deserved. This defense also reduces shame. Many people blame themselves for being influenced, assuming weakness or poor judgment. Recognizing standard tactics reframes the experience. You weren't flawed, you were targeted with methods that work on human psychology. Learning these tactics trains pattern recognition. You begin spotting them early before emotional investment forms. Subtle pressure stands out. Repetition becomes noticeable. The same scripts appear in different people. Over time, this awareness creates psychological distance. You stay engaged without being entangled. Manipulation loses effectiveness because surprise is gone. When you know the moves, the game becomes predictable, and once predictability replaces confusion, control shifts back to you and stays there. Notice when praise disappears after compliance. Noticing when praise disappears after compliance is a powerful defense because it reveals when approval is being used as a tool rather than an expression of appreciation. In manipulative dynamics, praise is often given not to acknowledge who you are, but to shape what you do. Once compliance is secured, the reward vanishes and a new expectation quietly takes its place. This pattern conditions behavior. Praise appears early, generously, even intensely, reinforcing the idea that approval is tied to performance. When you comply, you feel seen and valued, but over time, what once earned appreciation becomes the baseline. The warmth fades, not because you did something wrong, but because the praise was never about you. It was leverage. Emotionally, this creates confusion and self-doubt. You may try harder, give more, or question what changed. Manipulators rely on this uncertainty. The absence of praise becomes a silent signal that you need to adjust, improve, or sacrifice further to regain favor. Control is maintained not through criticism, but through withdrawal. When you notice this pattern, clarity returns. You realize the issue is not inconsistency on your part, but intentional conditioning. Genuine appreciation remains steady, even when expectations are met. It does not disappear the moment effort becomes routine. This defense restores self-respect. You stop chasing approval that was never meant to last. You recognize when praise is transactional rather than sincere. And once you see that approval is being used to manage your behavior, it loses its power. Compliance no longer feels rewarding because you understand the cost. By noticing when praise disappears after compliance, you protect yourself from being slowly trained to overextend. You reclaim the ability to act from choice rather than conditioning, and manipulation weakens because its reward system no longer works on you. Refuse to argue about your reality. Refusing to argue about your reality is a powerful defense because manipulation often begins by pulling you into debates about your own experience. Once you start defending how you felt, what you perceived, or what you remember, the focus shifts away from the behavior itself and onto whether your reality is valid. That shift is where control quietly takes hold. Manipulators don't need to disprove you. They only need to exhaust you. By questioning your reactions, minimizing your feelings, or reframing events, they lure you into endless explanations. The longer you argue, the more authority they gain over what is considered real. Your lived experience becomes something that requires approval. Emotionally, this is draining. Being told your reality is wrong creates confusion, self-doubt, and the urge to over-explain in hopes of being understood. That urge is exploited. Each justification becomes another opening for dismissal or distortion. Refusing to argue doesn't mean shutting down. It means recognizing that your internal experience is not up for negotiation. You know what you felt. You know what you observed. You don't need consensus for it to be true. When you stop engaging in debates about your reality, the manipulation loses momentum because it has nothing to push against. This defense restores emotional authority. You stop chasing validation and start standing in certainty. Conversations either move forward honestly, or they don't continue at all. Emotionally, this can feel risky because it may disrupt harmony or provoke pushback. But that pushback is revealing. Respectful people don't need to override your reality to be heard. When you refuse to argue about your reality, you protect your self-trust. And without access to that trust, manipulation has no foundation left to stand on. Recognize manufactured crises. Recognizing manufactured crises is a vital defense because false emergencies are one of the fastest ways to bypass judgment. A manufactured crisis is designed to flood you with urgency, fear, or responsibility so intensely that thinking feels like a luxury you can't afford. When everything is framed as critical, nothing is questioned. Manipulators create crises to force immediate action. They exaggerate consequences, invent deadlines, or imply irreversible loss if you don't comply right now. Emotionally, this triggers panic and hyperfocus. Your attention collapses onto the problem they present, while alternatives, context, and verification disappear from view. That tunnel vision is the goal. When you recognize a crisis as manufactured, the emotional spell breaks. You begin to notice familiar signs, vague but dramatic language, pressure without specifics, resistance to delays, and hostility toward verification. Real crises withstand questions. Manufactured ones demand obedience. Emotionally, stepping back can feel dangerous, as if pausing might cause harm. That fear is precisely what's being used. When you slow down anyway, you often discover that the situation does not deteriorate. Consequences soften, timelines stretch, or the crisis resolves itself without your sacrifice. This defense restores agency. You stop reacting to alarms and start assessing reality. You ask what truly happens if nothing is done right now. In many cases, the answer reveals how artificial the urgency was. Over time, recognizing manufactured crises recalibrates your sense of threat. You become harder to rush and harder to scare. Pressure loses its authority because you no longer confuse loud urgency with real importance or emotional intensity with truth. Protect your sleep and energy. Protecting your sleep and energy is a defense that safeguards the foundation of your mental resilience. Manipulation becomes far more effective when you are exhausted. Lack of sleep weakens emotional regulation, lowers critical thinking, and increases impulsivity. When your energy is depleted, boundaries blur and compliance feels easier than resistance. Emotionally, fatigue makes everything heavier. Small pressures feel urgent. Minor conflicts feel overwhelming. Decision-making shifts toward short-term relief rather than long-term alignment. Manipulators, whether consciously or not, take advantage of this state. Late-night conversations, drawn-out conflicts, and constant demands drain your reserves until you're operating on survival mode. When your energy is low, your nervous system prioritizes rest over discernment. You may agree just to end a conversation. You may accept narratives without questioning them. You may doubt yourself simply because you don't have the bandwidth to think clearly. Protecting sleep restores that bandwidth. This defense is often underestimated because it feels unrelated to psychology, yet it is deeply connected. A rested mind spots inconsistencies, tolerates discomfort, and delays reaction. An exhausted mind seeks escape. Sleep is not just rest, it is recalibration. Protecting your energy also means limiting exposure to draining dynamics. Constant emotional labor, prolonged tension, and unproductive engagement consume more than time. They consume clarity. By preserving energy, you preserve perspective. Over time, this practice strengthens autonomy. You become less reactive, more grounded, and harder to pressure. When your body and mind are supported, manipulation loses its advantage because it relies on you being too tired to notice, too drained to resist, and too depleted to choose yourself. Don't mirror manipulation back. Not mirroring manipulation back is a vital defense because responding with the same tactics quietly traps you in the very game designed to control you. Manipulation feeds on escalation. When you match it with sarcasm, guilt, silent treatment, or power plays, the interaction shifts from protection to participation. You may feel momentarily empowered, but the cost is clarity. Manipulators are comfortable in distorted dynamics. They thrive in confusion, emotional games, and shifting rules. When you mirror their behavior, you abandon your grounding and step onto terrain they know well. The focus moves away from truth and toward winning, dominance, or emotional leverage. At that point, even if you win the exchange, you lose something more important: alignment with yourself. Emotionally, mirroring manipulation can feel justified. Anger wants symmetry. Hurt wants retaliation. Pride wants balance restored. Manipulators rely on this instinct. They provoke reaction specifically to pull you down to their level, where behavior becomes the story instead of intent. Once both sides are manipulating, accountability dissolves. Refusing to mirror manipulation is not passivity. It is discipline. It means holding steady when bait is offered. It means responding with clarity or disengaging rather than counterattacking. This refusal exposes the imbalance. When one person remains grounded while the other escalates, the manipulation becomes visible. This defense preserves your nervous system. You don't have to rehearse tactics, keep score, or justify behavior you don't respect. Over time, not mirroring manipulation protects your integrity. You remain recognizable to yourself even under pressure. And in that steadiness, manipulation weakens because it cannot pull you into chaos if you refuse to speak its language. Identify coercive help. Identifying coercive help is a crucial defense because control is often disguised as care. This form of manipulation doesn't arrive as force or demand. It arrives as assistance you didn't ask for, solutions you didn't request, and concern that quietly overrides your autonomy. It feels supportive on the surface, but its true function is to position someone above you. Coercive help creates a subtle power imbalance. By rescuing you, the other person frames you as incapable, dependent, or indebted. Gratitude is expected. Compliance follows. Once help is accepted, boundaries become harder to enforce because refusal can be reframed as ingratitude or rejection of goodwill. Emotionally, this tactic is effective because it exploits vulnerability. Everyone needs help sometimes. Manipulators wait for moments of uncertainty or stress, then step in aggressively, offering aid that comes with strings attached. You begin to feel obligated to listen, agree, or defer, even when discomfort is present. Identifying coercive help means noticing whether assistance respects your agency. Genuine help empowers choice. It asks before acting. It withdraws gracefully when declined. Coercive help persists. It pushes. It insists it knows better. It treats your resistance as evidence that you need more control, not less. This defense requires trusting your discomfort when help feels invasive rather than supportive. You are allowed to refuse assistance that costs you autonomy. You are allowed to say no, even when intentions are framed as good. When you identify coercive help, the emotional fog lifts. You see that the issue isn't kindness, it's control. And once control is recognized beneath the surface of care, manipulation loses its moral cover and its leverage at the same time.